the ringtone of her smartphone, ringing out close to lunchtime on a very ordinary working Thursday, once again divided Cassandra's life into the happy period before and the almost hopeless one after. The word mum popped up on the screen, and although calls in the middle of the day weren't too common, the woman had no misgivings about it. Maybe mum missed her or wanted advice on clothing choices. Cassandra put a pencil dot in the margins of the sheet with a variant of the customer's contract and hurried to take the call, so as not to worry her family with a long wait. As soon as the woman heard her mother's voice, which sounded unusually muffled, it seemed to her that her heart plunged downwards. It was obvious that this was not a happy event, and the assumption was unfortunately confirmed. "Cassandrachka, hello you, don't worry too much please. I happen to be in the hospital right now." "Cassandra, you're freaking out." "Mum, what happened? What hospital are you in? What did the doctors say to bring in? What's the room number?" A voice from the phone interrupted the flow of questions. "Cassandra, I'm begging you, don't worry. It's just like in the cinema. I slipped, fell, almost passed out, but I'm fine. My neighbor Maggie was passing by and she cheered me up and supported me while we waited for the ambulance. The doctor said I'll be fine, but I'll have to stay in hospital for a while." "Mum, why didn't you tell me before? I would have rushed over and helped. I didn't want to bother you in the middle of the day, but my office hours are 4 to 7 p.m. in the evening, and if you're going from the office to my house and then to the pharmacy, I was afraid you might not make it. In general, please write down what you need to bring here. The main policy and phone charger are needed. Water not carbonated yet, because for some reason I'm very thirsty." The invisible mum sighed, and the woman imagined how the face of her dear person was distorted from the painful shock and hurried to finish the conversation, specifying the number of the hospital and the room. Cassandra reread the list of things her mother had dictated to her, added chicken broth, wet wipes, and went to ask her supervisor to leave. "Mr. Jasper, please allow me to leave early today, for personal reasons. Mum's been admitted to hospital." The boss, a friend of Cassandra's husband's from his student days, expressed polite words of sympathy, and when he found out in which hospital Mum was lying, he encouraged his subordinate and inquired, "Well, the doctors in our regional almshouse are good. Maybe the atmosphere is not too luxurious, but the equipment and staff at the top. I've been in this hospital several times and I was discharged as good as new. So you're going to be fine. Don't get too excited. By the way, are you driving the car today or is Kevin driving it? Maybe Nicholas can give you a lift in his car." Cassandra was touched by her boss's concern and decided that she was in no position to refuse. "Thank you, Mr. Jasper. That would be very helpful. I won't keep the driver long. I just need to get to Mum's house. I won't keep Nicholas any longer. I'll collect the necessary things and then I'll call a taxi. Thank you." The supervisor wished Cassandra success and promised, "Come out in 15 minutes to the main entrance. I'll tell Nicholas to wait for you at your mother's house and drop you off at your and Kevin's family nest. He's coming back for me anyway, and your house is on the way." Thanking her sensitive boss again, Cassandra went to switch off the computer and tidy up her workplace. She had taken the contract with her so as not to let the whole team down and to complete the necessary work by the next morning. The woman was not very good at recognizing the meaning of the stories the driver was trying to entertain her with, but she was grateful that the flow of his speeches made her at least react in some way and prevented her from slipping into anxious thoughts. Following the list, ticking off each recorded item, Cassandra packed up her mother's flat, watered her favorite flowers. She shut off the gas and water just in case, checked to see if there was anything perishable in the fridge, collected the rubbish to throw away, and only then did she go downstairs and set off with the talkative Nicholas next. Not far from Cassandra and Kevin's house, there was a supermarket with a pharmacy inside, and the woman decided to stop there on the way. Asking Nicholas to stop by the container yard, she threw out the rubbish she had collected and rushed off to get some groceries. Moving almost on autopilot, Cassandra bought everything she needed and was soon preparing dinner for her husband and broth for her mother at the same time. While the food was boiling and baking, Cassandra called Kevin and explained the situation. "Kevin, Mum is in hospital. I'm going to go and see her. How long I'll be there, I'm not sure yet. dinner will be on the cooker." The man confessed. "I'm aware Jasper told me you need support. You wait for me. I'll try to get there early and we'll go to the hospital together. I'll be there for anything else you might need, but I'll be there for you."
Kevin didn't let his wife down and, grabbing her and the 2 bags she had packed, drove her to the hospital. Cassandra managed to persuade the nurse taking the bags to let her see her mum and the attending doctor, who was thankfully on site. Kevin remained waiting for his wife in the lobby, but gave words of kind words and wishes for a speedy recovery.
Bridget tried to smile when she saw Cassandra enter the room, but she was visibly uncomfortable and frightened. The woman said a soft but distinctive hello to everyone in the room and made her way to her mother's bed. A weight was suspended from the unfortunate woman's right leg, and her lips, bitten almost to the point of blood, were a clear indication that the ice victim was in a lot of pain. Cassandra listened to her mum's story of her predicament and, trying not to cry, began to put everything she had brought into the bedside table. The phone was immediately put on charge. Cassandra gave her mother some broth, made her eat a few spoonfuls of raw, grated carrots. The internet says that such a salad in the first days after the injury the best vitamin remedy. Then sour morsels you drink, also useful. "Oh, daughter, don't worry. You should probably run. Kevin will be home. He'll probably be surprised you're not here." Cassandra explained that her husband had rushed home when he heard what had happened, so she wouldn't have to take a taxi. That he hadn't been missed, but he'd said hello, as if just waiting for that line. The woman in the next bed became active. "The orderlies and nurses here are rude and rude." She intervened in the conversation. "You can't call them day or night. They drink tea, spin around in front of doctors, give chocolates, even give money without any use. They're still doing their jobs with their sleeves down." Cassandra kept silent, and having found out from her mother the name and patronymic of her attending doctor, went in search of him. The restless neighbor made a good point. "In the residence room, if not, then in the dressing room. Look, there, probably, with someone courtesy." Thanking the grumpy woman dryly, Cassandra went out into the corridor. The nurses in the trauma room, accustomed to all sorts of relatives, tears and hysterics, looked at the visitor, asking how to find a doctor with a mixture of irritation and fatigue. But one of them, who held herself like a superior, answered thoroughly.
"Mr. Oliver is in the superintendent's office at the moment. At that end of the corridor is the penultimate door. Wait there, or there is a bench near the resident's room."
Cassandra waited for the doctor, and he recognized her as Bridget's daughter and invited her into the office. Showing a picture on the computer screen, Mr. Oliver explained, "If I may say so, your mum's fracture was a success. Generally, there are 2 treatment options." The man began to explain the nuances of each option, then asked, "Which option did you decide on?" Cassandra looked the doctor in the eyes but did not answer, but asked a counter question. "Tell me, Mr. Oliver, for example, if a patient with a fracture like my mother's was someone close to you, what would you recommend?" Smiling, the doctor replied briefly, "Osteosynthesis. A very similar case. My aunt, our head, performed a similar operation. It's been a year since she is active again, even in the countryside, so I cannot keep up with her." The woman clarified all the details of the upcoming operation, wrote down what else she needed to bring for the post-operative period, and having said goodbye to the doctor, left the office. Cassandra had to announce to her mother that the operation was scheduled for the next day, and having collected herself, the woman presented it as lightly as possible, trying not to upset her mother. "Tomorrow I will come and meet you after the operation. Everything will be fine, don't worry." "Cassandrachka, what about your work? The boss will probably scold you." "Don't worry about that. I'll do my job and I won't let you or the chief down." With the operation, the long road to Bridget being able to walk again had only just begun. For a fortnight, Cassandra visited her mum almost daily to feed and nurse her. The woman tried to object and repeatedly stated, "Cassandra, you take care of yourself. Don't come to see me so often. The food here is not bad, and I do not have an appetite. Where it will come from, if my energy is not spent on anything." But Bridget could not persuade her daughter. When the day of her discharge arrived, Cassandra went to the doctor for recommendations. Mr. Oliver was cautious and warned, Your mum is a very energetic lady. Well, I've made my point to her, and I'll make my point to you. I wouldn't be overly optimistic if I were you, but there's no need to despair. Although it is impossible to fully rely on the injured limb. Crutches are Bridget's best friends for the next month, and then you should also take care. Of course, it is necessary to move, but carefully. Prophylactic treatment is indicated to prevent pressure sores. I'll be expecting a follow-up X-ray in 6 weeks. We'll see how far along the bone is in the healing process. That's pretty much it. Cassandra checked. Maybe some vitamins for Mum to take? Mr. Oliver shrugged. Well, in principle you could. You'll have to get a rehabilitation plan from your local clinic. Cassandra called a taxi specializing in transporting people with limited mobility, and after a heroic journey through the streets, Bridget was finally in her flat. Cassandra faced a new problem. Her mum's physical condition still left much to be desired. Even a simple trip to the bathroom or kitchen could result in a new injury. For the first time, Cassandra came to Bridget twice a day, and by the New Year holidays she was almost exhausted. The traffic jams were taking up so much time that there were only a few hours left for sleep. Cassandra turned to her husband. Kevin, let's get Mum to come stay with us for a while. At least I won't have to go back and forth between flats. The man gloomed and after a languid pause replied, Cassandra, I'm wonderful to your mum. Bridget is a wonderful woman, but I'm sorry, but I'm going to be blunt. There's nowhere to put her here. I mean, it's a studio flat. It's a big room, but there's only one room. When I persuaded you to take out a mortgage, I didn't get any sympathy. Both you and your mum were against it. Kevin, you could put up a screen. It'll be like 2 rooms. Look, but Bridget would be uncomfortable in the first place. I play computer games. I listen to loud music all night. Besides, you should ask her if she'd be willing to move. I'm 100% sure she'll say no. Your mum is very tactful and wise and understands that the further away she lives, the better her relationship with her son-in-law will be. Kevin turned out to be right. Bridget, having barely heard the idea of her son-in-law and daughter moving into the flat, only snorted indignantly. There can't even be a conversation. The walls help at home. I will not go to you, especially there, and sit quietly. It will be uncomfortable. Cassandra obeyed her mother's will. She didn't want to argue with her husband. She continued to waste time standing in traffic, and the lawyer's position at Mr. Jasper's firm had to be vacated. With her boss's permission, Cassandra had transferred to a half-time position and was glad that her boss had been able to meet her needs. She prepared contracts, visited and trained her successor, and diligently performed all the duties that did not require constant presence in the office. Rehab, however, took a lot more money than the woman had realized. Sometimes she shared with her husband her indignation at the fact that pharmacies changed prices at will and tried to sell the most expensive version of a drug. That's when Kevin would start grumbling. Look, Cassandra, your mum must have some free medication. The woman tried not to answer. After all, the family budget was not suffering, and she had not asked her husband for money for almost 6 months since the fateful news of her mother's troubles. Cassandra had generally tried to deal with the situation on her own, without interfering with Kevin. As the weather changed, Cassandra's schedule, by tradition, remained almost unchanged. In the morning she made her husband's breakfast and, if she had time, made preparations for lunch and dinner. Then, after putting some of the breakfast in containers, she rushed to her mother's house, stopping at the shops and pharmacies on the way. Nursing, keeping her spirits up and helping her move around the flat took up a lot of her time. Cassandra would then run into the office as well and rush home for the evening. In case of any emergencies, her neighbor, the same Maggie who had helped her wait for the ambulance, had the key to her mother's flat. She would sometimes drop by to watch TV and gossip together. So Bridget wasn't abandoned, but Cassandra was desperate to get her mother back on her feet. And not just because she had to spend a lot of time traveling back and forth between the distant parts of the city every day, without holidays and weekends. Mum was simply the closest person to her. She had, in fact, given Cassandra the gift of life twice. The first time on her birthday 38 years ago, but more importantly later, when a terrible tragedy struck Cassandra in a terrible avalanche. It was her mother who was there for her in those black days, helping her to move around when her legs almost collapsed on nervous grounds, forcing her to drink and eat, then by persuasion, then through force. Abandoning her monetary and not dusty job, her mother sold the flat in their hometown and, almost like a huge and clumsy cube, moved it 2,000 kilometers away from the place where everything Cassandra reminded her of her inhuman grief. It was Bridget who had forced her into a job where it was almost impossible to be alone with her sad thoughts, where she had to look stylish and trim. Cassandra didn't consider her help to her mum to be a sacrifice and, despite her tiredness, tried to take care of her husband, especially since the 10th wedding anniversary was approaching, and the woman wanted to arrange a touching congratulation and a pleasant surprise for patient Kevin. She made a preliminary version of the menu, found a confectionery where orders were made according to individual designs, and agreed to prepare an unusual shaped cake for her husband, who loves sweets. The holiday was approaching, but shortly before it arrived, Kevin, during morning breakfast, warned, "Sorry, Cassandra, but I need a car for a few days. I have to go to the branch in the neighboring region, because it seems that the branch manager is messing up her reports, and the profits are down many times over. Although in other divisions everything is even, and in some places even growth is observed. Of course, I'll try to make a quick trip, but planes are unlikely to fly in those parts. I don't feel like traveling by train. Can you manage without a car?" Cassandra herself was counting on the faithful family horse, but she didn't argue. After all, her husband really needed the car more. She smiled. "I'll manage, of course." Kevin thanked her politely for breakfast and promised, "It's okay, we'll buy you an iron horse too. Once the situation at work normalizes a bit, you'll be able to choose a model." Running out of the house, the man kissed his wife on the cheek, winked and said, "Don't worry, I remember about our wedding anniversary. I'll try to be there by Friday evening." Taking advantage of her husband's absence, Cassandra moved in with her mother for a while so she wouldn't waste time traveling. During these few days, she managed to do a general cleaning, and the flat became somehow especially fresh in spring. Only on the eve of the holiday, Cassandra had to return home to bring her urgently needed diploma to the office. It was a good thing, though, because she also had to clean up the house and make some of Kevin's favorite salads. In the morning, the woman took the festive treats that had been put aside in separate containers and rushed to her mother's house. She habitually gave her a massage, helped her walk around her room, and even after waiting for the lift repairs to be completed, finally took her mother outside to enjoy the nice weather and enjoy the feeling of life returning to the way it was before the injury. After a short walk, Bridget and Cassandra had lunch, and the daughter began to apologize. "Mom, I'm sorry, please forgive me. I'm going to leave early today. I want to surprise Kevin. Turn the telly off when you get bored. Your phone is charged. Call me if you need anything, okay? Run, Cassandra. Happy holidays to you and Kevin. It's been 10 years together." Kissing her mom, Cassandra ran down the route she had planned. Spring, which had long ago come into its own and was rapidly approaching summer, gave soft warmth, and the sweet and tart scent of blossoming lilacs set her in the most romantic mood. Contrary to popular belief that getting married in May was a sign of trouble, she didn't have to worry about it in her second marriage. On the contrary, Kevin was a safe haven for a woman. There were no violent passions between them, but there was mutual sympathy and respect. Cassandra appreciated her husband for the fact that he did not pry into her soul, did not harass her with jealousy and suspicion, did not demand to give birth to an heir or heiress. It was only when he declared his intentions to be serious that Cassandra warned him directly and honestly that children were not part of her plans. The man was not frightened by this statement. A few years after the wedding, Kevin asked if she had changed her mind about the child, but having heard a categorical no, did not begin to find out the reasons and did not raise this topic again. The man was a good partner, and of course she loved him in her own way, with all the strength that a wounded heart was capable of. Following the list she'd made the day before, Cassandra bought drinks, got the calamari Kevin adored. And so she bought all sorts of little things: crusty baguette, fresh green salad, fruit. The 2 large shopping bags that Cassandra had thoughtfully brought with her gradually filled up. Hanging them on both shoulders, she ran into the pastry shop where she had ordered the cake. Now it was safe to go home. Cassandra looked hopefully at the family parking space and sighed with relief there was no car, so she would have time to set the table, hang the balloons, and dress up before her husband returned. She praised herself mentally for the handy bags, thanks to which one hand was free. Hurriedly opening the doors, the woman finally found herself in the family nest. Placing the box of cake on the banquet, Cassandra suddenly froze with surprise. In the familiar hum of a residential apartment building, there was a foreign sound coming from the kitchen. Strangely, there were no foreign shoes on the mat, no strangers' belongings visible, but the clatter of dishes came to her quite clearly. It was as if someone was moving a massive plate or a bulky mug. Kevin and Cassandra didn't have any pets. They had all wanted to get a cute dog, but unhappiness with Mum had tweaked that plan. It probably would have been much smarter to go out to the playground, close the door, and call her husband, but from exhaustion, Cassandra didn't act as safety dictated. Automatically pulling her trainers off her feet, and right with her bags on her shoulders, the woman walked into the kitchen and nearly collapsed in surprise. Tucking one leg under herself on a chair sat a boy of about 6 years old from the looks of it. The unknown little guest was completely engrossed in his meal. On the table in front of him was Kevin's huge mug, a bottle of water, and a large deep plate into which Cassandra had assembled the puffed salad from the evening before, so that it had time to soak in. The spoon sticking out from the edge was a clear indication that the dish had already been unceremoniously sampled. The child was biting into a stick of raw smoked sausage with gusto, and the woman's heart ached as the memories came flooding back. It was too painful to act rationally. For a few seconds, Cassandra even thought she was hallucinating due to overexertion or some other reason. However, the vision was too realistic in both sound and image, and even sausage-flavored. The engrossed boy broke away from his tasty pastime only after Cassandra, wheezing slightly from nervousness, caught his attention with a question. "Hello. Who are you and what are you doing here?" The boy jumped up from his chair and, without letting go of the sausage from his hand, reported, "My name is Thomas Brown. Uncle Kevin brought me here, told me to wait here for him, said I could eat whatever I wanted. So I'm eating. It's good sausage, but it's very salty." Cassandra had no idea that the man the boy called Uncle Kevin was not her husband Kevin. Such an incredible coincidence as in the film, when the hero didn't realize he had opened someone else's flat with his own keys and was completely unconcerned by anything in the typical setting of a standard flat, simply couldn't have happened. Alexandra could safely vouch that it was not easy to find even a closely similar design as in her and her husband's accommodation. Of course, the situation, with the appearance of a boy in the kitchen, must have a logical explanation, the woman thought. She herself, having married Kevin, had become Taylor, and the surname Brown meant absolutely nothing to her. Her husband was an only child with his parents, but he had cousins and cousins, as far as Cassandra knew. Except they hadn't been invited to the modest wedding, and she didn't know them not only by sight but by their last names. So it was quite possible that the Thomas Brown sitting in front of her was the child of one of her husband's cousins. But why did he, without even warning, suddenly brought this boy to their flat? Shaken out of her psychological equilibrium, Cassandra couldn't concentrate. Her thoughts were jumbled, and she didn't even have time to come up with any plausible theories before Kevin called. Coming out of her daze, Cassandra finally took the bags off her shoulders and took the call. The man began to speak quickly, literally not letting his wife get a word in edgewise. "Beloved, you and I have just missed each other by a little bit. I've just left Bridget's flat, and I'll be there in 20 minutes to explain everything to you. In the meantime, set the table, will you?" The bewildered woman cheered up a little and replied briefly, "Okay." She could feel Thomas's gaze on her very clearly, but she could not find the strength to look him in the eye. The woman brought her new slippers from the corridor, just recently bought in anticipation of the approaching summer season, and suggested, "Thomas, it's hot at home in sneakers. Keep the flip-flops, put on more comfortable and convenient will be." The child silently obeyed. To diffuse the situation and to occupy the boy she had dropped off, but to avoid having to talk to him a lot, Cassandra asked, "Thomas, do you know how to inflate balloons?" The boy nodded. The woman quickly went to the room, brought the child a whole package, opened it. Then, on some impulse, rinsed the tips through which Thomas was to inflate the balloons and handed it to him, asking, You inflate not too much. When you get tired, rest. And I'll help you tie them. Agreed? The child nodded dutifully and, without any embarrassment, asked, "And your name, Cassandra, is it?" Cassandra shrugged her shoulders. "Yes. That's a beautiful name. Thank you." There was silence in the kitchen. The boy, thinking about something, busied himself with the balloons. Cassandra, watching her guest with a sidelong glance, began to unpack her bags, prepare what she had planned, and gradually set the table. She put the cake in the fridge, and, distracted by the thought of tying the balloons Thomas had inflated, felt a pinch of pain rather than irritation. She wasn't angry with her husband, but there were all sorts of thoughts running through her mind. The woman felt the curious gaze of the little guest but did not dare to look him in the eye. So they looked at each other but hardly spoke to each other. Cassandra didn't notice when Kevin entered the kitchen with a huge bouquet of roses in his hands and a large bag. The man put the bag on the floor and handed the flowers to his wife. "Cassandra, congratulations to you and myself on our holiday. I see you've met Thomas and made friends? How marvelous. Well then, let's celebrate." The boy, visibly cheerful after Kevin's appearance, said modestly, "Congratulations." And as everyone sat down at the table after the inevitable fuss, he loudly boasted, "Uncle Kevin, I inflated the balloons myself and Cassandra helped me tie them. Did we give you a good surprise?" The grown man mumbled something in response to the little guest's chatter, praising Thomas and his wife, who hadn't even touched her food. There was a sense of tension in the flat, and Kevin set about remedying the situation. He turned on the music softly and began to praise his wife's cooking enthusiastically. Then he made a toast to Cassandra's beauty and charm. He took a box out of his pocket, handed it to her, and said, "Congratulations, I hope you like it." The woman, confused in her assumptions and thoughts about why her husband had brought a child into the flat, only now remembered her gift. Leaving the not-too-cheerful company for a while, Cassandra clutched the never-opened box in the palm of her hand, pulled out the hidden present. Returning to the table, she handed the bundle to her husband and confined herself to a meager phrase, "Happy tin wedding anniversary." Kevin hastily tore the wrapping paper and began to loudly admire the pewter cup and began to show the gift to Thomas. The woman felt uncomfortable and sank back into her thoughts. Not at all how she had imagined celebrating her wedding anniversary. She had wanted to prepare a surprise, but her husband had managed not just to surprise her, but to completely throw her off balance in the most natural way. Cassandra coughed violently, choking on her mineral water when she heard the question. "Cassandra, Thomas is going to stay with us for a couple of weeks, okay?" Cassandra was silent, not knowing what to say. Kevin tried to justify himself. "I went to Bridget's to pick you up on my way home and I wanted to explain everything to you. But I didn't have time, so it was a surprise. I'm sorry I didn't think to warn you, but I was sure I'd catch you at Mum's, and on the way I'd let you know we had a visitor." Kevin's monologue ended in a long silence. Cassandra moved the food on her plate with her fork without raising her eyes to her husband. He, confused, didn't know what else to say for himself. With childlike directness, Thomas broke into the silence by asking in a ringing voice, "Aunt Cassandra, thank you, I've already eaten, but can I have some cake now?" The boy showed the empty plate, and with a stony face Cassandra got up from her chair and walked to the fridge. She wanted to scream, to stomp her feet, to cry, and to hit the dishes soiled like her faith in her husband's honesty, but she knew it wouldn't make it any easier. The most likely explanation for Kevin bringing Thomas to the flat seemed to her to be his cheating husband. With her whole being, Cassandra now hated the man she had loved for 10 years as much as she knew how. Kevin, who knew his wife well, guessed from her jerky movements that she would say everything she had on her mind and decided to take the little guest away from the table to a sitting area where he could distract himself from the upcoming serious conversation between the adults. "Thomas, come on, I'll switch on the games console. I have mostly complicated games, but we can find something to your taste on the internet. Or I'll switch on cartoons if you want. Will you be able to eat cake there?" The boy asked interestedly. "Of course, everything is possible there." The boy's eyes sparkled, and he trustingly followed the owner of the flat to a cozy, soft corner. Cassandra, having heard her husband and guest talking, cut off a large piece of cake, carefully placed it on a plate, switched on the electric kettle and carefully watched it boil. The click of the switch being switched off brought her out of her reverie. Making the tea, the woman placed a cup of the tasty drink, sugar and spoon, and a plate of cake on a tray, and then took it to the table near the play area of the flat. Kevin was showing Thomas a collection of computer games, but the boy, who was clearly well-mannered, broke away from the fascinating activity and thanked her. "Thank you very much." The woman nodded and, turning abruptly, walked away. When Kevin walked into the kitchen, he found a strange sight. Cassandra sitting on the floor, holding a dirty-looking pair of children's sneakers, tears rolling down her cheeks. The man tried to make a joke. "Cassandra, come on." A child with dirty shoes walked into the kitchen. "We'll switch on the Hoover robot and let it work. It's not a big deal. Is it worth getting upset over a little dust? Especially since it was a holiday." Cassandra looked at her husband in a way that made him uncomfortable and said quietly, "Kevin, I think I've told you repeatedly that I don't want to be in the same space with the children for too long. It's beyond me. I guess your action, or as you put it, your surprise, had good reasons, and I can understand that. But I'm sorry, Bet. I don't have the slightest desire to deal with the proceedings today. I'm going to go to my mum's and stay with her for a while." Kevin could not understand the reason for his wife's categorical decision, but he could see that Cassandra was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, so he proposed. "Cassandra, I'm really guilty for not warning you, but I can explain. I think that when you hear me out, you'll realize that I just couldn't have done it any other way. I'll wait until you're ready to talk." The woman suddenly gently lowered the children's sneakers to the floor, wiped the tears from her cheeks with the back of her hand, and walked to the door as if she hadn't heard her husband. Kevin took his wife's hand and asked, "Cassandra, wait a minute. I'll call a taxi to Bridget's house, so I don't have to worry about you." Cassandra nodded and was soon in the car, fumbling with the strap of her purse. The road was clear, and the journey to her mother's house took much less time than it did during peak hours. Hardly had the woman opened the door when she heard it. "Maggie, come in, dear. I'm not feeling very well." Cassandra closed the door behind her and took off her shoes and walked into her mum's bedroom. Bridget became alarmed when she saw her daughter. "Cassandrachka, why are you back? Didn't Kevin come home? I reckon your wedding anniversary should be in full swing and you're here for some reason. Daughter, what's wrong?" Cassandra walked over to her mother's bed, sat down on the floor, and leaned her head on Bridget's palm and recounted everything that had happened since she had come home and seen Thomas there. When she had finished, Cassandra made a suggestion. "Mum, I'm pretty sure Thomas is Kevin's illegitimate son. The boy looks to be about 6 years old, which means my husband has been giving me the horns and has the nerve to show me evidence of his infidelity on our wedding anniversary." Bridget tried to reassure her daughter. "I'm sure Kevin can explain everything. I feel he loves you. Trust my experience. He would hardly risk his relationship with you and cheat." However, Cassandra cried without stopping. The woman stroked her so grown-up but defenseless sobbing girl, but did not utter any more words because they were all powerless. Finally, when the flow of tears had dried up, Cassandra silently got up from the floor and went to wash her face swollen with tears. The woman felt completely devastated. Returning to her mother's room, Cassandra confessed, "I'm very tired for today, and do you mind if I lie down?" Bridget did not object and suggested, for example, that we talk some more and have dinner. She realized that her unfortunate daughter needed to rest. "Of course, Cassandrachka, but why don't you and I have a sedative, at least some valerian? It would do you and me good." Cassandra complied with her mother's request and went to bed. The nervous tension was so intense that the woman passed out and woke up when it was 10 o'clock in the morning. Jumping up on the couch, Cassandra rushed to the kitchen, where she found her mother stirring the batter for pancakes. "Good morning, daughter. You're just in time for breakfast." The women cooked the pancakes in 4 hands and, as if in agreement, never said a word about yesterday's situation. As Cassandra washed the dishes, Bridget asked, "Daughter, please go to the theater with Maggie. She has 2 tickets to a very good play, great seats. Her niece gave them to her for her birthday. They were supposed to go together, but as luck would have it, her niece got sick. The rest of the family can't keep Maggie company. Someone's got a holiday cottage, someone's traveling on a business trip. All in all, it's a shame to lose the ticket." Cassandra shook her head. "Mum, I don't want to go anywhere I'm not in the mood." But if Bridget had something on her mind, she knew how to insist. "That's why you should go, because you're not in the mood. Art is great at shifting thoughts in your head and changing your emotions. Please, daughter, not for the sake of the missing ticket, but for me." Reluctantly, Cassandra had to comply with her mum's wish. However, she refused the offer to run to the hairdresser's beforehand and get a new haircut. After waiting for Maggie to take Cassandra away, Bridget called her son-in-law and said in an almost commanding tone, "Kevin, Cassandra will be gone for about 3 hours. Come over, we need to talk." The man did not resist, but warned, "Bridget, I'll definitely come. But I don't have anyone to leave Thomas with. I can probably find a nanny, but I wouldn't trust the boy to someone I don't know, so I can only come with him. Do you mind?" The woman sighed. "I don't mind." "Good. Then I'll be at your place with Thomas in half an hour." 30 minutes later, Bridget carefully reached the door, leaning on a steady walker, and let Kevin and Thomas into the flat. The man introduced the child, and the boy said hello politely. The landlady tried not to show her incredible excitement and invited Thomas into the kitchen. "Come in, I have a TV and cakes waiting for you. Do you want cocoa or tea?" The child announced that coffee was the most delicious for him, but that children should not drink this drink often, and he would have tea, because he was too old for cocoa. Bridget almost laughed out of surprise, but she got her emotions under control in time and, turning to Kevin, asked, "Can I give Thomas a chicory drink then? It's almost like coffee." The boy got excited. "I want to try this chicory, Uncle Kevin, can I?" Kevin agreed, and when the hostess had cleverly prepared the treat for Thomas, the man handed the boy his smartphone and explained, "I need to have a chat with Bridget. You please stay here. Eat the treats, play on your phone, maybe even watch some clips on the internet for a bit, okay?" "Sure, Uncle Kevin, I'm perfectly capable of unsupervised. Don't worry." Watching this picture, Bridget could hardly contain herself from crying and hiding her emotions. She slowly began to walk towards the room, which was called the hall in the old-fashioned way. She was followed by Kevin, who was eager to find out what Bridget wanted to talk to him about. The woman sat down in the armchair, and the man sat on the sofa across from it, so that the conversation could be carried on comfortably. The hostess looked at her son-in-law attentively, but he did not bear it for long and asked without preamble, "Bridget, can you explain to me why Cassandra reacted so inappropriately to Thomas's appearance in our flat? I admit it was my fault for not warning her, but we're adults. Instead of having a calm conversation, she basically just ran to you. Is that normal?" The woman did not interrupt her son-in-law's indignant speech, but she did not hurry to answer his question, but asked a counter-question. "Before I start a difficult conversation to try to help my daughter keep her family together, I need to be sure it makes sense. Tell me honestly, is Thomas your illegitimate son?" The man's outrage was unparalleled. "No, of course I'd never think of cheating on Cassandra. I love her very much, I respect her, but her attitude towards children is beginning to frighten me. Thomas ended up in our flat because of a desperate situation, but Cassandra didn't even try to get along with him. Although, as you may have noticed, he is a well-mannered, bright, and charming boy." Kevin's answer calmed the worried woman, and taking a deep breath as if preparing to parachute in, she decided to tell her son-in-law the truth. "Well, all things secret, as they say, come to light. As a husband, you have the right to know why my daughter avoids contact with my children. I think I have the right to tell you her story, which at first seemed like a happy fairy tale, and then turned into a terrible nightmare that destroyed the usual life. Cassandra grew up to be a marvelous and clever girl, a real joy to me and my husband. We had no trouble getting her into one of the best grammar schools in our city. The wealth of our family and the positions held by me and my husband allowed Cassandra to be her own among the same, as they say, the golden youth. However, the gymnasium had a very strong teaching staff and grades were not for sale, as you might think. Children were skillfully interested in learning, and our Cassandrachka was one of the best students in the class. She was even sort of made a mentor for her desk mate Michael. The boy was from a very good family, quite influential in our town. Just kidding, his dad is a regional prosecutor. His mom is in the same department, not on the last position. In general, they were better off than our family, but they did not hinder the development of friendship between their son and Cassandra. They sincerely welcomed her, and they did not talk to me and my husband through the lip, but quite kindly. When Cassandra was in year 10, her father died suddenly. A blood clot had broken off, as the autopsy showed. It was Michael's family that supported me and Cassandra after this loss. I still thank them for that, because I was in such a state that I almost went to my husband. So of course I didn't mind at all when Cassandra decided to marry Michael. So what if they were just over 18 at the time? Obviously you can't stand in the way of real feelings. Michael's parents didn't mind either, and were even happy that my daughter was part of their family. A year after the wedding, Cassandra and Michael had twins and 2 boys, Stephen and Marcus. Healthy, happy, strong. They grew up and made us all happy. Cassandra couldn't get enough of her babies. You know, Kevin, she used to tell me that she was walking, rolling the pram in front of her, and her heart would jump out of her chest from happiness. Of course, I helped whenever I could. My husband's mom repeatedly suggested that Cassandra hire a reliable nanny, but my daughter refused every time, and she mostly managed on her own. God knows what it cost her, but she didn't give up her university studies, and even managed to manage without a sabbatical. And her husband's father got her a prestigious and well-paid job, a position where the working day was strictly rationed, and there was a social package and other niceties. He had the opportunity, of course, and he was not ashamed to patronize his daughter-in-law. Cassandrachka was a clever girl. Stephen and Marcus were 6 years old when my daughter became pregnant again. Michael welcomed the news with joy, and there was nothing to be sad about. The family had a wonderful relationship. As far as I knew, there had never been a fight between them. It was as if the 2 halves were lucky enough to be united as one. I know a lot of people were jealous, and some ladies tried to have an affair with Michael, but he didn't want anyone but my Cassandrachka. Everything was so perfect that I didn't even think that everything would fall apart overnight because of a terrible tragedy. Cassandrachka had to go to the doctor, and Michael volunteered to pick up his sons from kindergarten. Ridiculously, his car broke down that day, so he decided not to call a taxi, but to take the children home through the park. The weather was fine, and although the rides were not yet open, there was a pizzeria at the exit of the park that the boys wanted to go to. Michael met a mate on the way, and while he was talking to him, the kids got excited and ran out onto the lake, but the marsh ice was treacherously thin. My grandchildren, as witnesses told me later, did not even have time to shout. They went under the water in a flash. Michael and his mate rushed to the pond, but there was no way to catch the boys. Managed only to arrive at the scene of the tragedy divers. Michael later tried to justify himself as wound up, constantly repeating that he was distracted only for a few seconds, but what good? Our boys had drowned, and it could not be undone. My son-in-law was the first to tell me this bitter news, because he was afraid for Cassandra, and for good reason. I went to the private clinic where I knew Cassandrachka was at that time. My heart told me that it was better to have doctors close by when the worst of grief came upon my daughter. Seeing me in the corridor, Cassandra must have realized everything from my face. She had been hysterical since the news of what had happened. Even a large dose of medication could not calm Cassandra down. She never made it home that night, ending up in hospital with a nervous breakdown. Because of her worries about her dead sons, my daughter was unable to save the baby that was developing under her heart. He wasn't even considered a baby by the doctors. She had already lost him. At the funeral of Stephen and Marcus, Cassandra stood like a stone statue, no tears, no emotion, pale as death. Especially terrible was the emptiness in her eyes. Michael was no less worried. Having turned gray in his 25 years, he tried to take Cassandra's hand for support, but she shied away from him like a leper. She never again crossed the threshold of the flat where she lived with her husband and sons. How many times Michael had tried to talk to her could not be counted, but it had never worked. Cassandra just cut her husband out of her life. Michael's mother came to us. Having realized that my daughter did not want to see or hear from her husband, she was on her knees, begging me to forgive her son, saying that he was not like himself. She shared her sad thoughts that he was on the verge of leaving this world, but Cassandra did not react. She had never forgiven her husband for the loss of her sons. Michael could not forgive himself either. Indeed, he had turned from a blossoming man into a pale semblance of his former self. Cassandra predictably quit her job, seemingly of her own volition, but in fact everyone realized that she simply could not be under public scrutiny. In addition, there was an unusual and unexpected problem. Her daughter was approaching hysterics. It was worth it to go outside and see the child. She changed her route, but it was impossible to absolutely eliminate the possibility of meeting children. One day, Cassandra and I were riding in the lift, and a neighbor with a baby came in with us. Everything seemed to be normal, but I rejoiced too early. After the traveling companion got out of the lift, I looked at my daughter and saw that her chin was bleeding. She had bitten her lip so hard trying to hold back a tantrum. After this incident, my daughter stayed at home all day and night for almost a month. I even called a special doctor, the best of the best, at home. There were changes, but not quick and not at all positive. After a period of apathy, my daughter became aggressive. It was as if she had an obsession, and the medication prescribed by the doctor could not cope with it for long. Cassandra would take the pills for a few hours, fall into a state of indifference to everything, then begin to think about something painfully, walking from side to side in the room. One day I saw that she was looking for poison options online, and I was seriously frightened. I realized that my daughter had decided to deal with the unwitting perpetrator of her children's deaths. I tried to stay close to my daughter at all times to make sure she didn't do anything irreparable. Once, Cassandra managed to leave the house in the morning while I was asleep. People told me later that she caught Michael at his work and attacked him with her fists. She was screaming, "Why do you live and our sons don't?" I don't know, maybe my acquaintances exaggerated, but supposedly 4 strong men could barely pull her away from the confused Michael. He didn't even resist. When I came to pick her up, my daughter was sitting in the back room, where there was the aroma of the hated sedative and some other drugs, and almost did not react to anything. I was told that an ambulance had come and sedated Cassandra. Among my acquaintances and neighbors, of course, there was only talk of my grandchildren's accident and Cassandra going mad with grief. One day, Michael's father called me and urged me to leave town with his daughter. You don't say no to people like him. Besides, I'd been thinking of ways to hide my daughter from sympathetic and prying eyes. I quit my job, sold my flat. Again, thanks to my son-in-law's parents, I managed to do it both quickly and at a price that was quite adequate, given the urgency. Cassandra and Michael were divorced in absentia. Again, thanks to his relatives. My daughter didn't even have to go anywhere. We ended up moving to this town, away from everything that was, and then you know the rest, Kevin. You met her, and my daughter started coming back to life. Don't get me wrong, Cassandra's not bad with kids. She's just still in pain. She refuses to be a mom again for fear of repeating the nightmare she went through. Bridget was silent as she recounted her daughter's terrible story. The woman was exhausted mentally. Kevin noticed how pale her face had become and hurried to the kitchen to fetch her some water. Thomas was playing on his phone, and the man stroked his head, filled a glass, and returned to Bridget in the hall. "I'm sorry to make you remember everything." The woman took a careful drink of her water and spoke bitterly. Kevin, if only it could be forgotten at all. I probably should have told you about Cassandra's past sooner, but I've been hesitant to say it out loud. My daughter, I understand, still can't talk about it either. The man looked at the woman, puzzled, and confessed. To be honest, I had no idea that Cassandra's reluctance to become a mum could hide such a tragedy. I thought she probably didn't want to ruin her figure. I can't imagine how she must have felt when she saw Thomas in our kitchen. What a surprise I managed to surprise her on our anniversary. How am I supposed to apologize to Cassandra and make her understand? I really had nowhere to bring Thomas, and for a number of reasons. The boy needed to stay for a week or two in a safe and comfortable place where his parents' enemies wouldn't think to look. I arrived at the branch and bumped into an old mate I hadn't seen since the demobilization. Winston was more than a friend to me. It was thanks to him that I survived the army, but that's a long story. In the civilian life, we were separated by our hometowns, and as it happens, our contacts were lost. I tried to find him on social networks, but without success. Perhaps I should have been more persistent in my search, then I would have found him. But I was building my career. Anyway, I haven't seen him for 15 years, and now I'm meeting Winston in a city that's foreign to both of us. Of course, he had changed over the years, but I recognized him at once. He almost walked past me without noticing, but I stopped him. It turned out that Winston had come to solve the problems of his sister and her husband. They were involved in a lawsuit with not two adequate people who used to conduct all affairs in a criminal way. Winston was most worried about Thomas, his nephew. He explained to his sister that the child should be hidden just in case, because through him these bandits could easily influence the decision of the issue in their favor, but they could not think of any safe place. And then I come out of nowhere. To Winston, the idea of getting Thomas out of town seemed the ideal. In fact, there were virtually no strings that could put the bandits on the child's trail. It was good that the boy had a strong character, a real man growing up. His parents and Winston told him he had to stay with me for a while, and he took the news in stride. I picked him up like a detective so I wouldn't get caught on the city's security cameras. We agreed to contact Winston in a week, and he should call me when the matter was resolved. Thomas, of course, is a perfect boy. He got used to being in an unfamiliar place. He even went to bed by himself after brushing his teeth. All we have to do is wait for Winston to call. Thomas is very easy for me to talk to, but I have to go to work on Monday and I can hardly take him with me. I don't know what to do now. Kevin was silent, and then Cassandra's voice came out of the blue. It's no big deal. You go to work as usual and I'll stay with Thomas. Just leave me the car so I don't have to take public transport to get to and from Mom. It turned out that, contrary to Bridget's calculations, her daughter had already returned from the theater and seemed to have heard some part of her husband's story. Preempting her mother's question, Cassandra explained. I couldn't watch the play in the theater. I went to the bathroom, washed my face, and realized I couldn't go back and look at the stage without even trying to get into the story. So I typed Maggie an apology and came here. Turns out I got back just in time. I guess I should have heard Thomas's story from the outside, because Kevin, I'm sorry I suspected you of cheating and I wouldn't have believed you if you'd told me all that yesterday. I can see the situation more clearly today. Mom, you don't mind if I visit you with Thomas, do you? The woman, trying not to frighten away the change in her daughter's attitude towards her children, spoke very carefully. Of course you can come. Bridget wanted to say something else, but her eyes were watering, and she decided to change the subject. Cassandrachka, Kevin, aren't you hungry? I could eat something right now. Let's go into the kitchen. All the more reason to see how Thomas is doing, see if he's bored. I've forgotten all about the rules of hospitality. The boy saw Cassandra and said hello, and the woman's voice trembled slightly as she responded to his greeting. Kevin, who had understood the reason for his wife's strange behavior, was now amazed at her resilience. She had been through such an ordeal and had never tried to appeal to his pity or to elicit sympathy with stories of what she had faced. Cassandra gently but insistently dismissed Bridget's attempts to feed everyone gathered in her kitchen that evening. Thank you, Mum, for everything, but we'll probably go home. I'll stop by tomorrow close to lunchtime. Kevin, who realized he had received his wife's forgiveness, was overjoyed and bid Bridget a heartfelt farewell, promising, "We'll all visit you all together tomorrow. If your health permits and the weather is warm, we can go out into the countryside. How would you like that, Bridget?" Wonderful, Kevin, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. After saying goodbye to Cassandra's landlady, Kevin and Thomas went to the other side of town. The man sat behind the wheel and watched in the mirror as his wife carefully fastened the boy's seatbelt. It was obvious that for Cassandra it was a completely natural gesture, once perfected to the point of automaticity. She was obviously a caring mother. She loved her children very much, and after her misfortune she was suffering in a way that her worst enemy could not wish for. Carefully parked the car at the entrance. The man carried the sleeping Thomas in his arms to the flat. Cassandra straightened out the rumpled sheet on the couch, carefully removed the boy's shoes, and covered the child with a blanket. Watching his wife, Kevin felt incredible tenderness for her. Suddenly, the woman he loved opened up to him from an unfamiliar side of her personality. and he realized that he had made the absolutely right choice. Later, with the door to the kitchen closed, they drank tea with the remaining cake, and it was as if there had been no wall of misunderstanding between them yesterday. With jokes and kisses, they planned the schedule for Sunday afternoon. The man dared to bring up the unpleasant subject and confessed. "Cassandra, I am a real idiot. I almost ruined everything with my act, and I want to say thank you very much for your understanding." The wife smiled. "Well, to be honest, also overreacted, so I propose to forget bygones." The weekend went cheerfully and even better than the spouses had anticipated. They'd managed to get Bridget out for a walk, too, and she'd been much less happy about the sunny May day than she'd been about her daughter's happy eyes. Cassandra was happy to answer Thomas's questions and also kept a constant eye on him to make sure he wasn't in danger. Neither her mother nor her husband dared reprimand her for being overprotective. Thomas didn't seem to care that he was surrounded by the utmost care. By agreement with Cassandra, he called her by her first name without using the word aunt and seemed quite content with his unexpected journey. When they had brought Bridget home after the entertainment, the trio had to wait, for there was no chance of leaving the woman without being fed. No one minded, though. Late that night, as Cassandra was putting Thomas to bed, the boy quietly asked her, "Do you think my parents are doing well? Will I be able to see them soon?" Trying to keep her voice firm and convincing, Cassandra replied, "Of course they are doing well. Very soon they will do all their business, and you will meet them." The boy fell asleep. Cassandra, afraid of waking the child, beckoned her husband into the kitchen and began to ask him about the story Thomas's parents were involved in. "Cassandra, I honestly don't even know all the details. Winston gave me a very brief outline, but I realized that his sister and her husband had been attacked by some really bad guys." The woman began to clarify, asking unexpected questions for her husband. "Are these bandits from the city where you went, or are they newcomers? Did your friend give you any nicknames?" Kevin told everything he knew, but Cassandra didn't have enough information and suddenly asked, "Can you get in touch with Winston in an emergency? I need some clarification from him to try and help Thomas' parents. Of course he's doing well and quite comfortable with us, I hope, but it shouldn't be that mom and son are separated for too long." From Cassandra's voice, it was impossible to guess how close she had taken Thomas and his parents' situation to heart. But now, knowing about his wife's past, Kevin realized how difficult it was for her. "Winston actually gave me a password to a chat room where all messages are automatically burnt. I think we can try to contact him." The man opened the necessary site, entered the data he had learnt by heart at the request of his army friend, and after a few minutes he exclaimed with joy, "It worked. Winston, you've greeted me." Cassandra thoughtfully advised, "Kevin, ask him a question, by the answer to which you can tell for sure whether your friend is talking to you or not. And if there is even the slightest doubt, immediately close the site and take the phone card out of your phone." Alarmed by his wife's suspicions, Kevin quickly typed a few phrases and eagerly awaited the reply. After reading the message he received, the man exhaled in relief. "All is well, that's for sure, Winston," he replied with our code phrase. Cassandra nodded and asked, "Great, text Winston that your wife will be texting him now and give me the phone number. I'll find out from your friend what I need to know." No longer surprised, Kevin handed the smartphone to his wife. She texted with someone she didn't know for quite a while. Then she grabbed a pen, quickly wrote a number on a bread wrapper, tore off a piece of paper with numbers, clutched it in her hand, and handed the phone to her husband. "I'm going to the bathroom. I need to make a call. Text Winston to come to this chat room in an hour. Then hopefully I can give him something concrete." Cassandra walked out of the kitchen and into the bathroom, which had the best noise insulation in the flat. Taking a few deep breaths, the woman dialed her ex-husband's father's memorized number. The phone was unavailable. Cassandra summoned all her willpower and dialed her ex-husband's number. Soon his voice came through the receiver. "I'm listening. Don't be silent." Cassandra's voice became hoarse with excitement, and she answered, "Michael, hello, it's Cassandra. I need your help. Or rather, I think your dad can solve the situation, but I can't reach him. The robot says the phone is out of range." The man's demanding tone softened considerably. "Cassandra, it's good to hear from you. My father is overseas, but if you tell me what the problem is, I'll do my best to help. I work in the district attorney's office now, so all my connections are at your service." "Thank you," the woman replied. She told me everything she'd learned and dictated the number she'd written down. "Okay, Cassandra, I get it. It's not a simple matter, but it's solvable. I think after all, for every scumbag there is a more powerful force. I'll try to help, but tell this friend of mine that I'll call him tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, depending on how things turn out, from his phone, and he can take the call." "Thank you, Michael." Without waiting for her ex-husband's retort, Cassandra ended the conversation, which had been very difficult for her, and washed her face with ice water, hoping it would bring her at least a semblance of composure. Still in the process of talking to Michael, she wanted to apologize to him, but she couldn't. The bitter resentment at the man's inattention that had caused her to lose her children still stung the woman's heart. At the same time, Cassandra realized that without the intervention of her ex-husband, who had extensive connections in the area, Thomas's family was practically doomed, and she wanted to keep the boy safe and try to save his parents. For a while, the woman sat in the bathroom, leveling her heartbeat with breathing exercises. Seeing that an hour had practically passed, she returned to Kevin in the kitchen and informed him of what Michael had said. The man texted his friend the information he had received from his wife and hugged Cassandra tightly. He could see how the woman he loved had shrunk in the last hour, and he didn't know how to help her. He wanted to protect her from all adversity. Instead, Cassandra had to turn, as Kevin easily guessed, to the man who had almost destroyed her fate to the ground. The conversation stirred the woman. She released herself from Kevin's embrace and automatically began clearing the table, oblivious to the fact that she was sending her husband's completely untouched food into the bin. Finally, the man intercepted her hand and suggested, "Drop this fuss. It's been a difficult day and we need to rest." Even as she listened to her sleeping husband's measured breathing, Cassandra could not calm down. The images of her babies came to her eyes as if they were real. Stephen and Marcus smiling toothless smiles at her. Then they were going to kindergarten for the first time and leaning against the window, waving their little hands at her. They hand her holiday cards. Here, obviously conspiring, instead of falling asleep, they applaud loudly and unanimously when she begins to sing them a lullaby. How many pleasant moments there had been, so carefully stored, somewhere far away in her memory, and so rudely had everything been crossed out by an accident. How many times she had warned her sons not to take risks, and still they had not listened. What was the use of being angry now, though? Stephen and Marcus are gone. Their father is now the only hope for Thomas to get a hug from his mom in the very near future. At least let this woman, a complete stranger to Cassandra, be able to help Michael. Thomas began to murmur something, and Cassandra slipped out from under her husband's arm and hurried to the boy. She gently adjusted the blanket he had almost thrown on the floor, felt his forehead, fearing he was running a fever, and sighed in relief as she realized that, in her experience, all was well. Thomas opened his eyes and Cassandra sat down on the edge of the sofa and began to hum softly a lullaby. The boy had long since fallen asleep, but the woman remained seated beside him. She was so anxious for the child to return to his parents, and at the same time, she realized that she would desperately miss spending time with him. As the sky, visible through the slit between the curtains, lightened, Cassandra went quietly to the kitchen to make herself some coffee and work on her paperwork, because there was no point in going to bed. In these dawn hours, there might be matters directly affecting Thomas' fate being decided somewhere far away, but Cassandra was powerless to influence anything. She had already done everything she could to overcome her mortal resentment, and now all she had to do was wait for the outcome. After carefully studying the papers, the woman made notes in the margins on a separate sheet of paper, wrote out her suggestions, and carefully tucking them all away in a zipped folder, began to prepare breakfast, trying not to make any noise. She had already decided to ask her boss to excuse her, so as not to tire the boy too much by traveling to unfamiliar places. After waiting for the time to send messages, Cassandra typed to the boss that she would pass the prepared documents through her husband and began to think of something to please the little guest, who of course was worried about the forced separation from his parents, although he tried to keep up his good behavior. When Kevin, who had showered but was still yawning, came into the kitchen, Cassandra had almost everything ready. She invited her husband to the table and asked, "Kevin, stop by on your way to Mr. Jasper's and give him the file for me. I've already warned him that I won't be able to stop by work for a few days, and if there's anything that needs to be reviewed, have him email it to me or pass it on through you. As a last resort, of course, I'll drive up, but I don't want to stress Thomas out. I wanted to go to my mother's house with him and then go to the Children's Entertainment Center so he could have fun playing on the computer, so he wouldn't think about sad things because he was having nightmares at night." Kevin agreed to his wife's plan, and after quickly swallowing his breakfast, he thanked her and started to get ready for work. Thomas woke up much later, but Cassandra had no thought of waking him up. She wanted the boy to be comfortable. The woman fed the child and then suggested, "Let's stop by my mom's for a bit, and then we'll go somewhere to rest." A text message arrived on Cassandra's phone, and she smiled when she saw the notification that the money had been credited. Kevin had worried about his wife not having any financial problems. The woman smiled and asked the boy, "Would you like me and you to go to an amusement park? It's not too far from the city, and there are lots of fun things to do there: a laughing room, rope courses, and I think even a climbing wall. Do you like that kind of active entertainment, or maybe you prefer the cinema? That's no problem either. I haven't watched a film on the big screen in 100 years. Thomas confessed embarrassedly, "I'd rather go to an amusement park, to be honest." "Well, that's where we're going." Bridget was delighted when her daughter came to see her with the boy. It meant Cassandra believed her husband and didn't rush out and demand the child be placed somewhere because of traumatic memories. She could see that Cassandra seemed to thaw out, even after her brief interaction with Thomas, and barely made them leave as soon as possible. "Daughter, I'm feeling just fine today. Go have fun. If anything, of course, I'll call you, and don't worry at all, really. It's like I even have more energy today after yesterday's walk." Turning to the boy, Bridget asked, "Thomas, I beg you, rest well for you and me." The boy nodded quite seriously and promised, "I'll have Cassandra take pictures and send them to you. You have a state-of-the-art smartphone, don't you?" The woman smiled and praised. "Well done, great idea. That's right. I'm going to have fun with you. Cassandra, check your phone is charged." Cassandra reassured her mom by saying that she could charge her phone in the car at any time. Soon the guests left Bridget, and she was left alone to dream that her daughter would finally decide to become a mum again. It was obvious to her that Cassandra had a great way with children, but she had suffered for so many years, deliberately avoiding contact with them. "May everything turn out well for my suffering little girl." Bridget prayed aloud, hoping that the plea would be heard upstairs. Cassandra, driving with particular care, drove Thomas out for fun and felt the weight of her willingly assumed responsibility growing on her. The boy had first of all asked to go on the ropes course, and the woman had agreed. Though at the sight of the rope stretched high, she wanted to grab the child in her arms and not let go. Cassandra watched the frolicking child and from time to time took photos, but did not dare to distract herself from sending particularly expressive pictures to her mother. It seemed to her that if she distracted herself for even a few seconds, something bad would happen to the boy. The thought crossed her mind of the degree of desperation Thomas's mom had been in, agreeing to give her son to a near stranger. Such an act could only be dared because of the real threat to the child's life and health. So she, Cassandra, had no right to let down a woman about whom she knew the bare minimum of information: name, surname, age, and the fact that the unfortunate woman and her husband were involved in a story that she could not get out of on her own. Cassandra, however, was in an even more advantageous position. Cheryl, Thomas's mom, knew less about the people who had taken her son in. The fun-filled Monday had flashed by without a second thought. The boy, tired from his many outdoor activities, fell asleep after a hearty dinner and rested peacefully until morning without crying out or waking up. Kevin and Cassandra chatted quietly in the kitchen. The woman spoke enthusiastically about how bravely Thomas had conquered the rides and showed pictures. "Tomorrow I want to take our guest to our museums after his visit to his mother, and then to the cinema or vice versa, as Thomas wants. If you can, come along, it'll be fun. He's so funny and sometimes he has such deep thoughts. He told me today that adults try to look serious on purpose to be feared and not to be picked on. Can you imagine? The man agreed that there was something reasonable in this inference and suggested, "Cassandra, let's go to bed too, like Thomas, because tomorrow, as I understand it, will be no less busy." Neither Tuesday nor Wednesday brought news from Michael or the boy's relatives. Although the child attended all kinds of entertaining and educational establishments, his mood was getting worse every day. He became increasingly brooding and sad. Kevin and Cassandra realized that the boy was missing his family more and more, but had no influence on the situation. It wasn't until Thursday, when Cassandra and Thomas were visiting Bridget, that the long-awaited phone call came. Michael informed his ex-wife that the main difficulties were over and warned her. "There are still a few things to be resolved, but that's the small stuff. The important thing is that the boy is now safe. His parents are on their way to the town where you live now. I warned them to call you in advance, as they will arrive and clarify the address. Anyway, I'll see this thing through to the final point, of course, so don't worry." Cassandra thanked her ex-husband profusely. "Thank you, Michael, and I'm sorry for everything." The man's voice was ringing as he replied to the woman he had hurt so much. "Cassandra, you have no idea how glad I am to hear from you, even if it is on such an occasion. I wish you happiness, and if you need anything, don't hesitate to ask. I'm always happy to help." Cassandra said goodbye to her ex-husband, and Bridget, who had heard her daughter's conversation, couldn't believe her own ears. It seemed her Cassandra had just spoken quite adequately to a man she had once loved dearly and then hated. "Mom, we have to leave. Thomas's parents are on their way and I have to give him a bath." The child realized that he would soon see his mom and dad and started jumping around the room shouting, "Yay!" Cassandra barely managed to keep him quiet. Bridget, happy that the situation had been resolved, gave the boy a souvenir of her photograph in the stamp collection he liked so much. "Here, Thomas, you will look at the album and remember me." The child promised. "Thank you, but I won't forget you, Grandma Bridget, even without stamps." Seizing the moment, Cassandra called her husband to tell him the good news, but it turned out he already knew. "Cassandra, Winston has already told me that thanks to your help, everything has been resolved. I'm taking a taxi home now to get ready for the guests." Cassandra was a little sad to part with the boy who had awakened in her memories of the most joyful days in the company of her sons, and she invited him to visit the toy shop on the way. "You know, I'd really like to get you something too. Choose whatever you want." The boy did not resist, but apparently shy, did not walk for a long time between the racks of toys on display, and soon he took a robot from the shelf, which was not the most expensive. On the way to the checkout, Cassandra put in her basket the aeroplane Thomas had once told her about, and a few more board games. "Oh, there's so much," said the child in surprise. "What a treat today." Cassandra agreed. "Yes, Thomas, it is a very big holiday today." By the time the doorbell rang, the boy was already cleanly bathed, and the cutlery was flaunting on the table. Cheryl, barely over the threshold, rushed to her son, hugging him and showering him with kisses. The boy's father handed Cassandra flowers, and Winston gave Kevin a firm, manly hug. After Thomas, assuming the role of an adult, introduced the parents to the owners of the flat, everyone sat down at the table. Cheryl volunteered to help Cassandra and confessed, "If it weren't for your kindness, I don't know how we would have managed. I don't know how to express my gratitude. My husband and I have raised money to cover the cost of Thomas and your inconvenience." Cassandra turned pale and replied, "Cheryl, put that envelope away immediately. Don't insult me with this act. You have a boy who will be going to school soon, so spend this money on him. And, if you don't mind, send me and my husband a picture of him once in a while. That would be the best thanks." An embarrassed Cheryl burst into tears and hugged Cassandra. When Thomas, concerned about Mum and Cassandra's long absence from the table, peeked into the kitchen, he saw the women roaring, unable to hold back their tears, and began to ask in a mature manner, "What happened? Did you bump, cut, burn?" Cassandra and Cheryl synchronously wiped away their tears. Mom reassured her son. "It's okay, honey. Everything is just fine." Hugging the boy, she picked him up, lifted him up and spun him around. Cassandra watched the happy people and did not feel envy, but wished that this family had all their troubles in the past. After the guests left, Cassandra trustingly snuggled up to her husband and confessed to him. "You know, I think I'm ready for motherhood. Thomas proved to me that children are the greatest happiness." The man did not change his wife's mind. Soon Cassandra pleased him and Bridget with the news of her pregnancy. Exactly on time and without any complications, the woman gave birth to a daughter. The girl was named Veronica, as a symbol of victory over the terrible situation that had happened to the sister of Kevin's army friend, and victory over the terrible memories of the past. Olivia was beginning to lose patience. She'd been preparing for this evening since yesterday, shopping, cleaning the apartment, preparing all sorts of appetizers and entrees for the family and friends. And now she was sitting there listening to her husband mock her. Adrian has an amazing ability to find a flaw in everything. Moreover, this gift is revealed in the presence of strangers, and when she and her husband are alone, more sensitive, loving and affectionate husband cannot find. But when the third, fourth, 10th person showed up, he was a fountain of sarcastic remarks about Olivia. This time she was the protagonist of the bad joke. "I passed by a hairdresser's yesterday," Adrian said. "Looking out the window, my wife was sitting in a chair, and the master was working on her. I think I'll wait. She comes out, and what do you think?" A bald haircut. His sister Emma chuckled, running her spoon into the salad bowl to make herself a Caesar dressing. "I wish they'd shaved her bald," Adrian laughed, and that laugh was like a sharp arrow through Olivia's body, electrocuting her brain and making her tense. She'd been dyed red. You wouldn't believe it, her hair was the color of copper wire. "What about you?" my mother-in-law asked, snacking on a ham and cheese roll. I'm sure I kicked her back to the hairdressers to change her hair color. "Yeah, now. So she can pay those barbers and hairdressers again? I made her dye her hair at home. If you look closely, you can even see that not all of her hair is dyed. There's copper coming through, look closely." The guests laughed, eyeing Olivia's hair, and she sat there red with embarrassment. Every time Adrian mocked her, she wanted to get up and leave. One time she had done just that, but then there had been such an enormous scandal. "You have no respect for my family," Adrian yelled. "They don't come to visit us often enough to be disrespected like this. How could you do this to them?" Olivia stood there like a delinquent child with her head down, unable to say anything to her husband. She regretted leaving the table 100 times over. She should have been patient. But this time the cup of patience was overflowing. No, she would not repeat the last attempt and leave the living room at the table she herself had lavishly set and her husband's relatives feasting. But she had to stop this bacchanalia, or it would never end. When the guests were a little tired of laughing at the color of Olivia's hair, poured the liquor into shot glasses and started snacking again, she said, "The other day I went to the orphanage where your children live. I looked at them, brought gifts and sweets. You know, they're so cute. Why don't we take them for the weekend?" The principal said it's possible. The room fell silent. The room fell silent as they heard Olivia's words. She raised her glass of wine as if nothing had happened. "Adrian, let's drink to the children you abandoned. I wish them to find decent parents, more worthy than you." A second later, her husband's heavy hand came down on her cheek. Her face flamed, burning as if it had been scorched by 100 tongues of flame. Adrian reached up, grabbed her hair roughly, and pulled her away from the table. During her happy student years, Olivia fell in love. Kieran was 2 years older than her and had already graduated from the military academy. He was as handsome as God, and when Olivia saw him in his uniform for the first time, the ground swam under her feet. He was tall, slender, with radiant brown eyes that looked like velvet, and he seemed to her like a man of unearthly beauty. They met on May Day in the city park. Olivia and her friend Mel were walking along an alley. The weather lavished the small riverside town with sunshine and warmth. A light breeze fluttered the white silk scarf around Olivia's neck. Suddenly it flew off her shoulders, carried by the wind, and flew away. Oops, the girl caught herself and rushed after him. She ran, and the handkerchief fluttered and fluttered in the wind. As soon as the airflow subsided a little, it dropped to the pavement next to the strange guy. He picked up the silk scarf and held it out to Olivia. "Is it yours?" the boy asked, not even thinking to address the strange girl as you. "Yes, thank you," she replied, and reached out to take the handkerchief, but he suddenly hid it behind his back. "Favorite thing?" the guy asked, smiling an open, slightly joking smile. "Grandma's present ... Can I have it?" "Of course you can," he answered. "Only in exchange for your name." "My name's Olivia. Give me the handkerchief." "That's a beautiful name. Why are you so scared? I won't eat your grandmother's gift after all." The stranger smiled, and Olivia felt so awkward that she was ready to turn around and leave the handkerchief and run out of the park. Seeing her confusion and embarrassment, the guy decided not to torture the girl any longer, spread the silk and gently lowered the handkerchief on Olivia's shoulders. "I'm sorry if I scared you or hurt you." "I didn't mean to," he admitted. "I was just walking alone in the park. It's a holiday, springtime, everyone's happy, having fun, going on rides. I'm Kieran." The guy held out his hand to her, and Olivia instinctively offered hers. His palm was warm. "Can I keep you company, or can you keep me company?" "I see you're out alone, too," Kieran said. "No, I'm with a friend," Olivia said, pointing toward Mel, who was standing nearby. She saw Olivia waving her hand and walked over to her friend and the strange guy. "Girls, let's have some ice cream." Kieran suggested it. "My treat." The company headed towards the summer cafe. Kieran turned out to be very sociable, cheerful, and confident. After ordering ice cream for himself and the girls, he asked, "Are you students?" "Yes, we study at the Teacher Training Institute," Mel answered, flipping her leg over her foot so that her already short skirt almost completely exposed her thigh. Kieran's gaze caught the lacy elastic of the stocking, and Olivia noticed it. Mel's doing her thing. She's going to start seducing Kieran, she thought. Olivia and Mel had been friends since freshman year. They were always together. Everyone around them wondered what could bind these two very different girls so tightly together. Mel was bright, even a little flashy. Long black hair flowing down her back almost to her waist. Fashionable clothes, chiseled figure with a narrow waist and lush breasts attracted the eyes of guys. And the girl knew her strengths and never missed a moment to use her feminine charms. Olivia was the opposite of her. She dressed modestly but tastefully. Her straw-colored hair was always braided or arranged in a bun at the back of her head. Her face was almost completely devoid of makeup, and her unremarkable, ordinary figure. Nothing made her stand out from the other students at the Pedagogical Institute. Mel was just suffocating, dying from the lack of male attention. "I should have gone to law school," she complained. "There are plenty of guys there, but in our group there are 2 nerds with glasses, and the rest are all girls." "Did you see the competition for law school?" Olivia asked her. 38 people per seat. You're retaking your history of literature exam for the 3rd time, and you're still talking about law school. No, Mel, you would definitely fail the entrance exams for lawyers. Her friend understood this and only sighed, listening to the lectures without much interest. But she found a way to stay visible. At lunchtime, Mel went to the cafeteria of the neighboring building, where mostly boys studied. This way, she often managed to make new acquaintances and even short-term, non-committal romances. When Kieran told a little about himself and the girls learned that he was graduating from the military academy, Mel's interest in the guy grew exponentially. "What do the officers do for fun?" she asked Kieran. "Just like everyone else," the boy answered. "They go to the movies, meet and date girls, go for walks. I like to go to the skating rink in winter and sometimes play hockey with the guys." "For me, sports are a punishment," Mel said, her red lipstick on her chubby lips. "And movies are boring." "What do you do for fun?" Kieran asked. His question was directed at both girls, but he was looking at Olivia. The velvet gaze of his brown eyes made her a little embarrassed. And Mel rambled on. "I love parties. I went to one recently, invited by some guys from the physical education department. Music, wine, rock and roll. We had a great time. Do you go out? The question was directed at Olivia, but Mel didn't give her a chance to keep the conversation going. Nah, Olivia here prefers to read romance novels and cram for notes. I barely even got her out today. It's a crime on May holidays when everyone is out enjoying the warmth and spring sunshine, walking around with balloons and flags, having fun, to sit at home and read books. Stop it, Olivia tried to stop her, but Mel couldn't be deterred. I also really like picnics, she said cheerfully. How do you feel about going out, Kieran? I'm fine with it, he answered, not taking his eyes off Olivia. Why not, if there's some meat marinated with spices, a bottle of red wine, and good company? It's decided. Let's go to the countryside together, Mel suggested. Olivia looked at her reproachfully. How could she impose on a guy she didn't know? But to her surprise, Kieran agreed very willingly. Next Sunday we can go to the river, he said. You owe us appetizers, we owe you meat and wine. From who, you? Olivia didn't understand. You're the one who calls yourself you? No, of course not, the boy laughed. It just occurred to me to bring a good friend of mine along. They finished their ice cream and walked around the park some more. Kieran asked for Olivia's phone number as he said goodbye to the girls at the exit. The girl took out a small notebook from her purse, wrote down her home number, and tearing out a sheet of paper, gave it to Kieran. Where do you think you're going, girl? Nicole asked Olivia as she watched her granddaughter pick up the cheese and sausage sandwiches and put them in a container. Mel and I and the two boys are going to the river, Grandma Olivia said cheerfully. We're going to grill kebabs and have fun. I'm glad. It's high time you had a rest. You've been sitting at home like a recluse. Olivia threw on a light jacket over a white knit sweater, laced up her sneakers, and gave her grandmother a peck on the cheek. Bye, Grandma. Don't miss me, she said. Go with God, dear. The pensioner closed the door behind her granddaughter. Everything that was happening in Olivia's life worried her. Nicole had raised the girl alone since she was 5 years old. The woman's son and his wife had died, and she had gone completely gray overnight. It is not known how Nicole would have survived the death of her only son and his wife if she had not had a granddaughter in her arms. It was not easy, but she raised the girl in care and love. A former teacher of Russian language and literature, she was proud that Olivia followed in her footsteps and also decided to become a teacher. When she graduates from college, she will go to work at the school and help me. Nicole thought, looking out the window as her granddaughter walked across the yard with a small leather backpack on her shoulder. Mel caught up with Olivia on the way. They were walking together to the bus stop where they were supposed to meet the guys. Did you like Kieran? Mel asked her friend. Seems like a nice guy, she replied vaguely. How complicated things are with you, Olivia, exclaimed the girl. What do you mean good? I mean, do you like him as a man? I don't know. I like him a lot. Strong, handsome, sociable, and a military man. I wish I could marry him and become a general's wife. Olivia laughed at her friend's so far-reaching plans. To become a general's wife, you must first marry a lieutenant. I don't remember where I heard this clever phrase. I don't mind. Kieran and his buddy were already waiting for them at the bus stop. They had backpacks and a collapsible barbecue in their hands. Hi, girls, said Kieran. Meet Adrian. Mel. Olivia. Nice to meet you, Adrian smiled, looking at his girlfriends without embarrassment. So are we going? Kieran asked. The company headed towards the forest belt, beyond which the river flowed. The forest path was winding, leading deep into the forest, enticing the boys with the singing of birds and the sound of wind in the pine crowns. The place where the girls were led by the boys was very beautiful. The bank of the river, covered with young green grass, was strewn with dandelions. The rays of the sun were reflected in the water with shining sparkles, shimmering and rippling. The boys gathered wood from the forest and built a fire in a small brazier. The girls spread a blanket on the grass and laid out snacks. While Kieran put the meat on skewers, Adrian poured wine into plastic cups and served it to the girls. "Victory Day is coming up," he said. "I propose to drink to the military men who gave peace to our country." "Great toast," Kieran seconded, but not very polite. "Why is that?" Adrian didn't understand. "Because when there are girls in the company, the first toast is always to male ladies." Kieran looked meaningfully at Olivia. She seemed to him the heroine of a fairy tale. Her hair seemed golden in the bright sunlight, and her eyes were even more blue, like water in a river. "And we don't pretend to be superior at all, so I suggest we combine the two toasts and drink to the military women who helped the bravest and most courageous men to defeat the enemy." "What amazing ingenuity." Mel praised Adrian. The guys drank wine, chatted merrily, and enjoyed a pleasant conversation. The meat turned out very juicy and flavorful. The girls praised Kieran, who had prepared his own marinade for the kebab. "Yes, Kieran has many talents," Adrian said. "He is exceptional in general." "And what is his exclusivity?" Mel asked. "Tell me. We know almost nothing about him or you." "What can I tell you? He's a fine fellow. He'll make a model officer. Kieran is a man of his own principles, which I would not advise you to compromise." "What kind of principles?" Mel asked. "For example, he won't lend money on principle. It's true, girls, you can't ask him to die. I even took offense at him at first. What's wrong with helping a friend? And a friend could spend less money, instead of throwing it away left and right." Adrian smiled and rebuked Kieran for his wastefulness. "He also believes that marriages are made for great and pure love." "Isn't it?" Kira argued with his friend. "How can you create a strong family if you don't love a person?" "Come on," Adrian grumbled. "Love is pure chemistry. You meet someone, look into his eyes, and a chemical reaction takes place, and then..." "And what next?" Mel looked at the boy who spoke so boldly about love. "And then the brain shuts down, and uncontrollable things happen." Adrian rolled his eyes amusedly. "Euphoria engulfs two people who are drowning in each other's arms. And then children. Common life, constant lack of money, snot, diapers, work, pots and pans, laundry. In short, this is how what in our world is called family life begins." Everyone laughed merrily at the theatricality of Adrian's speech. He was generally good at joking, easily picking up on any topic, and was cheerful throughout the picnic. Kieran, on the other hand, seemed thoughtful. He was watching Olivia very closely. Noticing this, she began to feel uncomfortable. She stood up and walked toward the river, squatting down and touching the water with her hand. "Cold?" She heard Kieran's voice behind her. Olivia stood up and turned around. "Not really, but it's too early to swim." Kieran Adrian shouted, "Can't you swim across the river?" "What do you want to bet?" Kieran asked. "Easy." Adrian approached his friend. "Or can't you do it?" The boy started to take off his sweater and then his jeans. Kieran looked at Adrian, squinting his eyes. "I accept the challenge," he finally answered and began pulling off his clothes. "Guys, just kidding. That's enough." Olivia was worried. "The water is so cold, you'll catch a cold." "Come on, Olivia. The boys want to show who's braver and stronger. Let them fight for the victory." Mel stood next to her, excited for the exciting competition. "What's the prize for the winner?" Adrian asked. "A kiss, of course." Without even thinking about it, the girl replied. "Let's get this over with." Olivia was still trying to talk the boys out of this crazy idea. The river was small, but it was dangerous to stay in the cold water for long. "Kieran, you seem like a sensible man. Please drop the argument." The guy came so close to her that she could hear him breathing. Olivia's heart sank. "Don't be afraid of anything. I'll swim across," he said quietly and lightly touched the girl's cheek with his fingers. Olivia froze, feeling the color spill down her cheeks, but Kieran was already walking toward the water. He and Adrian jumped into the water and swam to the opposite shore. The girls froze in impatience, wondering when they would get there and not have to worry. At one point, Adrian pulled ahead, but Kieran quickly caught up with him and overtook him, and then his head disappeared beneath the surface of the water. Olivia gasped, covering her mouth with her hand. "He drowned, Mel," No, it'll come out. Trust me, she said, staring off into the distance, her hand over her eyes as she shielded her eyes from the glare of the sun. Where are you? Kieran, show yourself already. But Kieran was nowhere to be seen. The minutes dragged by slowly. It seemed like an eternity had passed when the boy's head appeared on the surface. He was 10 or 15 meters ahead of Adrian and reached the shore very quickly. Kieran stepped onto dry land and waved to the girls who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. In the few minutes it took for the boy to disappear under the water, they had become very nervous. Fool, Olivia said quietly. Cool. Shaking her head, Mel said. When Adrian also appeared on the opposite bank, the girls had already calmed down. They saw the friends shake hands and walk along the bank toward the automobile bridge. After about an hour, they returned to the picnic site. Olivia was packing her things, empty containers and dishes, into her backpack. Her whole demeanor showed that she was upset, hurt, and about to leave, but Kieran didn't seem to notice. Where's my prize? He asked cheerfully. I'm waiting for a kiss. Olivia saw Mel jump up to him, put her arms around his neck, and kissed him right on the lips. You're a real hero, said the girl enthusiastically. Olivia, aren't you going to kiss the winner? Kieran asked, but the girl only took her backpack in her hands and walked towards the forest. She decided to leave. Her head was a little dizzy from the wine she'd drunk, and she was beginning to ache from the experience. Olivia stepped out onto the path they'd taken to the shore and headed into the woods with a determined stride. She was angry at the guys who'd made her worry, at Milka, who could kiss a guy she didn't know so easily, at herself for being shy and timid. The girl didn't notice that she had stumbled and twisted her foot. A sharp pain made her crouch on the ground. Olivia felt her ankle, her hands touching it painfully. She tried to get up but immediately sat back down, groaning in pain and helplessness. She couldn't walk any further. Olivia realized she had gone too far to call for help. The boys wouldn't hear her voice in the thicket of centuries-old pines. Olivia cried. Why do I always have bad luck, she thought. The day had started out so well, and then the boys had gotten into this stupid contest and she was in such a bad mood. And now her leg. Olivia heard the crunch of twigs and turned around. Kieran was walking down the path. When he saw the girl, he ran up to her. Olivia, what's wrong? Why are you crying? I twisted my leg. It hurt, she complained, wiping her tears and sniffling her nose. Let me see, he said, lifted the pant leg on her ankle and touched it with his hand. Olivia froze as she felt his touch. It excited her. She jerked her foot away, startled by the sensation, and moaned again. I see, said Kieran. Can you stand up? He lifted her to her feet, then picked her up and carried her down the path in his arms. Kieran's strong arms cradled Olivia so tightly that she didn't even resist, trusting him. Kieran carried Olivia all the way to the house, and then lifted her, carrying her in his arms, to the 4th floor. Grandmother opened the door. Oh my God, what happened? She splayed her hands, clearing the passage. I twisted my leg, Grandma Olivia replied. Kieran walked into the room and sat her down on the couch. Sweat was beading on his forehead. Only now did Olivia realize how much strength it had taken for him to come all this way carrying her. We should call an ambulance, Nicole said worriedly. Don't, the boy stopped her. Do you have a bandage? It was in the medicine cabinet somewhere. Nicole opened the cupboard and pulled out the shoebox that held the medicine. A moment later, Kieran was applying a tight bandage to Olivia's ankle. I'll fix the leg and you just keep it off for a few days and the pain will go away, he said, cutting the tip of the bandage. Grandma, I forgot to introduce you. Olivia remembered that she hadn't even introduced her savior to her grandmother. This is Kieran. We went on a picnic together. I'm Nicole. Grandma smiled. Why didn't you look after Olivia, Kieran? The boy looked embarrassed but didn't lower his eyes, just looked at Olivia. It's my own fault, Grandma, she said. Now I'll stay at home all the holidays. A boiling kettle whistled longingly in the kitchen. Young man, I'll ask you to move the table to the couch, and I'll bring everything to tea, Nicole said, nodding at the coffee table in the corner. I'll make tea with strawberry jam for the hero and savior. Do you like strawberry jam? I love it, Kieran replied cheerfully. A few minutes later, they were having tea. Kieran could see how proud Nicole was of her granddaughter. She gladly pulled out an album and showed him Olivia's baby pictures, which embarrassed the girl. Look, Kieran, how funny she is here with the huge bows, Grandma said, pointing her finger at the black and white picture. I took her to the first grade, and here we went to the sea with her. And this is the graduation. Isn't she beautiful? Kieran nodded, looking at the picture of a pretty girl with a braid over her shoulder. They chatted some more, and Kieran got ready to leave. Can I come visit you sometime? You know, to see how your leg is? He asked Olivia. Come, I'll be waiting, she said it so easily, so naturally, as if she and Kieran were old friends. Olivia wished he would come and see her. And when the grandmother slammed the door behind the boy and came back into the room, she found her granddaughter smiling. She was sitting with her legs stretched out and resting it on the stool Kieran had carefully placed before he left. In her hands was a teddy bear, once given to her by her parents. Are you keeping a secret with your favorite teddy bear? Nicole asked, smiling. Don't you want to share it with me? With what? Like how and where did you meet this Kieran guy? In the park, Grandma. Why didn't you like him? The girl was suddenly worried, afraid that her grandmother would find faults in Kieran. Not at all, replied the pensioner. Nice guy. Have a good time, baby. Nicole left the room, closing the door behind her. After a while, Olivia heard her humming something in the kitchen. Grandma always sang when she put the dough in. So it's going to be pies tonight, Olivia thought, closed her eyes, and fell into a happy, deep sleep. The next day she waited for a call from Kieran, but he didn't call. Busy, probably, Olivia thought. She spent the rest of the day reading. In the evening, Mel dropped by. As usual, brightly painted in a miniskirt and a blouse with a décolletage that showed off her ample breasts, she made the quiet atmosphere of the apartment noisy and cheerful. It's your own fault, she reprimanded Olivia for leaving the picnic, twirling in front of the mirror. If you'd stayed with us, none of this would have happened. Thank Kieran for finding you so quickly. Yeah, he's good, Olivia said thoughtfully. Mel looked at her carefully. Hey girlfriend, you're not in love, are you? She asked with a sly squint of her eyes. I didn't want to be in love with you, Olivia said, and I felt her cheeks reddening. Kieran's a really nice guy, the kind of guy you could fall in love with. He brought me home, sat me right here, bandaged my leg. Well, you know, Adrian's just as good, Mel said with her arms at her sides. He walked me home, too, and came to visit. He was visiting you. Olivia wondered. Why? We still have some wine left. Mel plopped down on the couch with her friend and suddenly covered her face with her hands. Olivia, we had everything with him. Everything, you know. He left me just before morning. Olivia gawked at her friend. Mel, of course, was a flighty girl who did crazy things all the time, but to sleep with a guy they'd just met a few hours ago. Olivia couldn't get her head around that. Did he confess his love to you? She asked Mel, hoping that at least it wasn't just a fling under the influence of good mood and alcohol, but the beginning of a long and serious relationship. Are you two together now? I don't know. Mel took her hands away from her face and stared thoughtfully at the TV. I don't know. Mel removed her palms from her face and stared thoughtfully at the TV. Then why did you let him in? What's the big deal? You can't die from lack of male affection. As you know, it's a fish out of water. What cancer? What fish? What are you talking about? Olivia shrieked. If he slept with you, he must be serious. Yeah, you think Mishka from gym class had intentions too? And Kolka from law school? If all the guys I slept with married me, I'd be a sultaness with my own harem of men. Mel and Olivia laughed. Indeed, the boys were paying attention to the bright and cheerful Mel, and she was in no hurry to drive them away from her. But Adrian had more than caught Olivia's friend's eye. She really wanted to continue her relationship with him and maybe even get married. However, Adrian simply kissed Mel on the cheek and said bye without saying anything about a new meeting, but she hoped that he would call and ask her out on a date. Olivia and Nicole were going to spend Victory Day watching movies. There were a lot of old and new war movies on the program. They sat comfortably on the couch, teacups and cakes on the table in front of them. Olivia didn't feel like going outside, even though she and her grandmother went to watch the parade in the town square every year. And this time, Nicole was feeling healthy. "I'd better stay home and watch the parade on TV," she said to Olivia. "Do you think your Kieran is marching in the parade now?" "Why is he mine?" Olivia was outraged. He hadn't even called in a week. "Okay, she'll worry, call again, or come over, hello, here I am." Nicole smiled. Her girl seemed to really miss her new acquaintance. Olivia and her grandmother hadn't even had a cup of tea yet when the doorbell rang in their apartment. "I'll get it," she said. Her leg wasn't aching anymore, and Olivia was able to get around the house just fine. She opened the door and was stunned. Kieran stood on the threshold. He was so handsome, and handsome in his military uniform, smiling so charmingly that Olivia couldn't hide her joy. "Hey," he said. "Happy holidays." Kieran handed Olivia the box of cake. She took it and stood there, smiling. "Can I come in?" Kieran asked, and Olivia snapped out of her stupor and led him into the hallway. "Grandma," she shouted, "we have guests. Come in, we're having tea, you're just in time." Nicole looked out of the room. "Young man, you're on parade today." She gave him an approving glance. "And then on parade, and on parade," laughed the boy. "We've been preparing for the festive march all week, and we haven't had time to visit you at all." "We're not offended," the pensioner waved her hand, "although someone here missed you very much." "Bah," Olivia yanked her back. "What a BA. Go to the kitchen. Get another cup and saucer for our wonderful guest. We'll celebrate Victory Day." Olivia's grandmother definitely liked Kieran. She suddenly sounded very tired and sent her granddaughter and her boyfriend out for a walk. "I'll lie down for a while, rest in silence, and you go, there are people having fun. Artists probably perform." Kieran and Olivia walked around the city until late afternoon. They watched the performance of various amateur groups, went on rides in the park, and fed the ducks on the pond. The boy and girl did not even notice how it got dark outside, and citizens began to gather on the square to watch the fireworks. Olivia looked at the colorful scatterings with her head tilted back, and Kieran couldn't take his eyes off her delighted face. He mentally said, "How beautiful you are, Olivia," and it turned out he'd said it out loud. Olivia looked from the night sky, lit up by the salutes, to Kieran. "What did you say?" she asked. "I didn't quite hear it well." "I love you," Kieran said, and kissed her on the lips. When she got home, Olivia was over the moon. Her grandmother was watching TV, but when her granddaughter appeared in the doorway, she turned it off by pressing a button on the remote control. Grandma Olivia rushed over to Nicole and hugged her. "I'm so happy you can't even imagine." "Why can't I?" "Yes, I can. You think I wasn't in love?" "Kieran told me he loved me." "He's a good guy, he won't hurt you," said Grandma. "Don't hurt him either. Appreciate what you have between you." It was a hot summer, with almost no rain at all. The residents of the city were suffering from the heat, escaping the scorching rays in the shade of trees, in parks near fountains, and on the river bank. The forecasters' predictions were disappointing. The heat would last for several more weeks. "Would you like some ice cream?" Kieran asked Olivia. "I can't eat it anymore." She looked at the boy with a pleading look. "Every day only ice cream saves me from this heat." "Do you want to go somewhere?" Kieran asked. "Like where?" Kieran had a vacation after graduating from the academy, and Olivia was on vacation. They were completely free and spent almost all their time together, dreaming about the future, making plans together. "If you want, we could go north," Kieran suggested, and Olivia couldn't tell if he was joking or serious. "To the polar bears," she laughed. "We can go to the south. We will swim in the sea and sunbathe on the beach under the southern sun," offered another option, beloved girl. Kieran, the words sun, tan, beach make my eye twitch. "Well, I'm sorry, but I just want somewhere to be with you, you know." So that there was no one else at all, he hugged and kissed the girl. "Come on, let's go to a campground. There is a great place outside the city. There are houses, forest, river. It's a good idea, Olivia agreed, but she felt a sudden fear, a bad feeling, and clung tighter to Kieran. The next day, the two of them took an electric train out of town. The administrator of the camp met them at the gate. "I'll show you around," the young man said, inviting you to follow him. "I understand you booked a cabin away from everyone else, so I left you that apartment over there." He pointed toward the forest and led Olivia and Kieran to their cabin. It was small, surrounded by pine trees. There was one large room with a couch, a table, and a large bed. "Here is the tea station." The administrator showed a kettle and a box with tea bags. "You can use it. The canteen is open on schedule. You can buy drinks, pastries, some food from morning till evening in the cafeteria. After dinner, there is dancing on the grounds. Come along if you want to have fun. Oh yeah, linens are in the closet. Towels are there too. Make yourself comfortable, and if you need anything, call me." The young man left, remembering to close the door behind him. Olivia sighed, looking around. "What are we going to do?" she asked. "To walk, rest, and enjoy each other," Kieran answered. He wanted them to remember the weekend spent at the camping site, because he was going to say the most important words to his favorite girl. "I feel uneasy," Olivia said quietly. "Worried about Grandma? Thinking about how she's going to be alone without you?" "I don't know. Something just came up." "Well, I'll try to take your mind off your sad feelings," said Kieran. "The first item on our cultural program is a trip to the river." They spent the whole day walking through the woods, boating on the river, swimming in water as warm as milk. Olivia and Kieran even skipped lunch, eating the pies that the caring Nicole had put in her bag. When it got dark, the boy and the girl sat on a bench near their cabin, admiring the stars and kissing. Kieran hesitated to tell Olivia the important news, afraid that she would be upset. "Is something bothering you?" Olivia noticed her lover's condition. "Yeah, we're going to have to break up." The girl pulled back and looked into Kieran's eyes, and he realized he'd picked the wrong words. No, you misunderstood. I'm going on a business trip." "For how long?" Olivia asked. "I don't know, maybe 6 months, maybe a year." The girl knew that there was a military conflict in one of the friendly countries, and that troops were being sent there to settle the unrest. But she had never thought that it would affect her and Kieran. "When?" Olivia asked, hoping that the moment of parting wouldn't come soon enough. "The day after tomorrow," the boy lowered his head. "If you only knew how hard it would be for me to leave you, I'd go crazy." Olivia put her palms to his face and looked into his eyes with a loving gaze full of concern, understanding, tenderness. "When I come back, you and I will get married. I promise you." "I love you very much," she said quietly, almost in a whisper, and then added, "Let's go." Olivia took Kieran's hand and led him into the house. She slowly undid the buttons of her dress and slid it to the floor, revealing a slender body in white lace lingerie. "Give me this night," Olivia said. "I'll be waiting for you, remembering every moment, every second." The lovers didn't sleep a wink until morning. They caressed each other again and again, plunging into the abyss of passion. 2 months had passed. Olivia stood in the bathroom mirror and looked at her face. Blue circles under her eyes, sunken cheeks, pale skin. She didn't look good. She moved her gaze to the sink, where a pregnancy test lay on the edge. 2 stripes were clearly visible against the white background. She was going to have a baby, a part of the person she loved. But Olivia was more worried than happy. Kieran hadn't sent a single letter, and she'd checked the mailbox several times each day. There were no phone calls, no messages either. Once, when she met Adrian, Kieran's friend, on the street, Olivia asked him if he had any news. But the guy shook his head, for some reason averting his gaze. The girl understood that in hot spots. There was no time to think about girls and love relationships, but it was possible to find a minute to scribble a couple of lines, "Everything is fine. I love you. I miss you." And now this pregnancy. Olivia thought about how to tell her grandmother so she wouldn't worry her too much. Nicole had been complaining more and more lately about her heart and high blood pressure. Olivia had called the ambulance again yesterday, and the doctors had insisted on hospitalization, but Grandma had flatly refused. "I will die at home, not in a government bed," she said, barely able to move her tongue, and signed her refusal with a weak hand. When she left for the institute, Olivia was always worried whether something had happened at home or how her grandmother was doing. The anxiety for her nearest and dearest people kept her from concentrating on the lectures. Mel was always trying to get Olivia to wake up. "Wake up, everyone's looking at you," she said as the entire audience stared at the girl, who had her eyes closed and was mumbling something under her breath. Olivia's friend sighed and shook her head. "You can't torture yourself like this." But there was no shadow of the old Olivia, the Olivia with whom they'd gone out in the evenings, shared secrets and made plans for the future. Olivia seemed petrified. "Olivia, what took you so long in the bathroom?" she heard Nicole's voice. "Breakfast is on the table. Hurry up or you'll be late for school." Olivia sat down at the table and reached for a sandwich. But when she felt a nasty lump in her throat, she put the piece of loaf with cheese and sausage back on the plate. After she drank her coffee, she kissed her grandmother and walked out the door. On the way to the institute, the girl met her friend. Mel stood near the entrance to the building and smoked a cigarette. When she saw Olivia, she waved at her. "There won't be a first class," Mel said. "The teacher's sick, so we can go shopping." She tossed the cigarette butt away and slung her bag over her shoulder. She noticed that Olivia was in no mood again. Mel understood that she missed Kieran, that she was in love, that she was in love, that she was waiting to hear from him, but she thought she shouldn't be so upset. "Nothing again?" she asked her friend. "No, there's other news though." "Well, what's the news?" Mel tugged on Olivia's arm. "I'm pregnant." The girl pulled a test out of her purse and showed it to her friend. "Shit, how could you do that?" Mel said, surprised and frustrated. "How?" Olivia didn't understand. "Careless, that's how." Mel handed the test back to Olivia and reached for the pack of cigarettes that was sticking out of the pocket of her bag. "Stop smoking," Mel, her friend, told her. "I just threw it out." "I'm allowed. I'm not pregnant. ... Thank God." "What are you going to do? You're not going to have a baby alone with no husband, no money, and no education, are you?" "I'm going to," Olivia said quietly. "You can't kill a child for lack of money and unfinished education. It wasn't his fault." "Oh, come on." Mel waved her off. "What baby? There's a little pea in there yet. Don't be a fool. I have a phone number of a good friend. She will arrange everything, but you'll have to pay. Do you have money?" Olivia was silent, absorbed in herself. She heard her friend's words, but they sounded distant, barely audible. "I said I had money to pay for the abortion." Mel shook Olivia's arm, trying to shake her out of her stupor. "I'm not having an abortion," Olivia said. "It's my and Kieran's baby. It has to be born." "You're an idiot," Mel exclaimed. "Where's your Kieran?" "No? And what makes you think he wants that baby? Did he ask you to bear him children? Or maybe he promised to marry you?" "Kieran will come back and everything will be fine. And I will give birth and wait with the baby for him." In the evening, Nicole and Olivia watched TV together. The girl thought about how to present the news so that her grandmother wouldn't get too excited, but she didn't even have to say anything. Nicole, who had raised her granddaughter since she was a little girl, knew her too well. "Are you thinking about how to tell me about the delay?" she asked, keeping her eyes on the TV screen. Olivia was silent. Her grandmother's foresight, her gift of sensing the state of her beloved granddaughter, always amazed the girl. "You're worried," Olivia, wondering what to do. How to move on, right? "Okay, Grandma. And it is possible not to think, but just to live. You should not try to rewrite your destiny. It is written long before the birth of any person by someone from above. You are doing a thankless job by racking your brains, doubting, thinking over every next step." "What should I do, Grandma?" Olivia suddenly put her head down on Nicole's shoulder, and Nicole put her arms around her and stroked her head. "Just to live," the pensioner replied calmly. "To live and enjoy every new day." "What do you think Kieran would say if he found out we were having a baby together?" Olivia asked, looking into Nina Petrovna's eyes. "I would say the same thing. You have to live and raise a child, love those who deserve it, and make each of their days better. happier. I'm scared. Don't worry, you'll give birth. By the end of the course, you'll be with your baby all summer. And then I'll help you. I'll take care of the baby while you're at the institute. Then you'll get your diploma, and that's it. What if Kieran doesn't accept the baby? Don't think about it. It's going to be okay. The new year was approaching. The streets of the city were covered with illuminations. A huge Christmas tree was put up in the center, shining with thousands of lights, and the counters of stores were bursting with New Year's goods clappers, sparklers, glittering balls, and soft toys. Olivia and Nicole pulled out a plastic Christmas tree and began to decorate it. Your parents brought this tree back from vacation, my grandmother recalled. Now it is no longer fashionable, but back then few people had such trees. Don't throw it away when I die. Let it be a memory. Don't talk. She's going to die, Olivia said, half jokingly, half seriously. Have you forgotten how you promised to help me with the baby? It's not like I'm going to die next year, Nicole laughed. The news was on the television. The announcer, in an elegant blue suit and tie, was saying something, but Olivia wasn't listening, only catching some of the phrases. Suddenly she shouted, "BA, turn up the sound," and she got off the stool she had climbed on to put a star on top of the tree. More than 50 of our soldiers and officers are missing. Their fate is still unknown. In other news,
Grabbing the remote, Olivia began to press the buttons, switching channels, hoping to find a newscast somewhere else. But in vain. The end of a sentence the newscaster said made her uneasy. Apparently they were talking about the military sent to settle a localized conflict. Kieran could have been there. That explained why there were no letters or messages from the boy.
Olivia sat down on the couch, her heart racing. She reached for the table where the pitcher of water stood, but suddenly passed out. I'm awake. A man in a white coat leaned over Olga. How do you feel? It's fine, Olivia said, trying to get up from the couch.
You're lying down. You don't have to get up. The doctor returned her to the pillow with a gentle but insistent motion of his hand. You're lying down. The doctor gently but insistently moved his hand back to her pillow.
What's wrong with me? I understand that you were worried and fainted. There is no threat of abortion, but I would recommend that you lie down, rest, and don't be nervous. Don't watch TV. It's only bad for you, the doctor smiled. Better listen to music. Which one? Olivia didn't understand.
Anything that gives you pleasure. Turn around, we'll give you a shot. It's a sedative, don't worry.
The EMT and paramedic said goodbye to Olivia and Nicole, wished them health and a happy new year, and left. You scared me. Girl grandma shook her head. She covered her with a blanket, turned on the wall lamp, and sat down in the armchair. Grandmother, do you think he's missing too? Olivia asked. We don't know, Mel. Let's hope all is well. Your Kieran comes back. By the end of winter, Olivia was no longer hiding her position. Her belly was clearly protruding, growing larger with each passing week. She carried the pregnancy easily, successfully passing her classes and studying for exams. And when the baby kicked her for the first time with its little foot, she circled the significant day in her grandmother's wall calendar with a red felt-tip pen. There was still no word from Kieran.
Mel, can you ask Adrian to ask around about Kieran amongst his contacts? They went to school together, so maybe someone knows something? Olivia asked her friend.
Adrian who? Mel didn't immediately realize who her friend was talking about. Oh, that Adrian. I haven't seen him for a long time.
What? Aren't you two together? Olivia wondered. I thought.
What's there to think about? We slept together a few times, and then I got bored with him. He doesn't take me to a restaurant, he doesn't take me out, he doesn't have much money, he doesn't give me presents. I like it better with Vincent from journalism school. You know what kind of car he has? It's so hot. Mel continued to talk about her new lover, and Olivia wondered if she should go to the academy herself. Maybe they knew something about her lover. The next day she was already standing at the checkpoint. The officer on duty demanded a pass, which the girl, of course, did not have. Not without a pass, he kept saying the same thing when Olivia asked him to let her through. I need to know about one man, she begged. He was sent on a business trip, and I haven't heard from him in 6 months. I can't help you. If you get a pass, I'll let you in. But in the meantime, get out of here. You're not supposed to be here. Olivia turned and walked away, but the clerk suddenly called out to her. Girl, try to go to the military enlistment office. They should know about everyone who. Well, you know where. Thank you, Olivia thanked him, and she headed off to the enlistment office. As she got on the bus, she wondered why she hadn't thought of it before. Only the military could tell what happened to those who were sent on a business trip. And who will you be to him? The captain asked Olivia in the duty room through a window with an iron grill.
The girl is confused. She's basically nobody to him. A close acquaintance, you know? We only give information about military personnel to relatives. The captain looked at her with a cold stare. It seemed that even Olivine's pleading eyes couldn't break through that ice block.
The girl came out of the building. A woman was sobbing nearby, trying to comfort her, and a young man was standing nearby. Did something happen to you? Olivia asked. Should I call an ambulance? The guy looked at her, shook his head. No, I called a cab. It's coming. I'm taking my mom home. My brother died on a business trip in a hot spot. We just found out. Olivia's legs felt woozy. What if Kieran did too? She squeezed her eyes shut. No, not that. He was fine. She would feel it. She couldn't help but feel it.
Completely frustrated, Olivia returned home. Nicole was lying on the couch. A tonometer and several packets of pills on a stool next to her.
Grandma, what? Blood pressure. Olivia rushed to her grandmother. Yes, baby, Grandma said quietly. I've had some medicine. It'll make me feel better. I'll call the doctors.
Don't bother people, Nicole stopped her. It'll pass.
You tell me if it gets worse, okay? Said the girl. I'll tell you to go eat. There's soup on the stove and cutlets. Go on, Mel. Nicole closed her eyes. Olivia adjusted the blanket and went into the kitchen. She was really hungry. The girl heated up some soup, cut off a few slices of fresh bread. Having eaten quietly, she washed the dishes behind her. Trying not to make any noise, Olivia tiptoed into the room where her grandmother slept. With a glance at the old woman, she walked to her room and lay down. Tired from the long walk, Olivia fell into a deep sleep very quickly. When she opened her eyes, it was already dark outside the window. The girl got up, drew the curtains, and turned on the light in the room. Her grandmother must still be asleep because no sounds were heard. Olivia went into her room and called out. Bah, are you asleep? There was no answer.
Olivia moved closer to Nicole and took her hand. The palm was icy, lifeless.
Granny, wake up, Granny. The girl touched her cheeks, shoulders, shook her arm, but the old woman didn't show any signs of life. Olivia called an ambulance and the doctors diagnosed a heart attack. After the grandmother was taken to the morgue, the girl called a friend. Mel, please come, please. Grandma's dead, she said quietly. In half an hour, Mel was already sitting next to her, hugging Olivia. She didn't cry, she just wanted someone to be there for her. And she had no one else but Mel and Kieran.
A month had passed since his grandmother's death. Olivia was coming home from the institute. From week to week, it was already time for her to give birth. The women's clinic even suggested that she go to the maternity hospital.
You'll take vitamins, get drips, prepare your uterus for labor, the midwife told her. But Olivia refused. She needed to take as many credits as possible, close all her debts at the institute, and consult with her academic assistant about whether she should take a sabbatical or whether she could write and defend her diploma without a year's break. Thinking about all this, Olivia didn't notice when a beautiful blue foreign car pulled up next to her and a familiar male voice called her name. Olivia, hi. Don't you recognize any old friends? The girl slowed down and turned her head at the voice. Adrian jumped out of the car. He looked stunning, black suit, snow-white shirt, shined shoes. Hi, Adrian. What a meeting. Olivia rejoiced. She hadn't seen Kieran's friend in a long time. The thought flashed through her mind that maybe he knew something about her lover. What's up? How's life? Adrian asked, hugging Olivia lightly around the shoulders. I see you're doing well. When are you due? Soon enough. Come on. I'll give you a ride, Adrian offered and pulled the girl by the arm. Olivia tried to refuse, saying it was good for her to walk, but Adrian was adamant. He opened the car door and gently placed Olivia in the front seat, then walked around to the driver's seat. Shall we? He was still as cheerful as the first time Olivia had seen Adrian. How are you, Olivia? Adrian asked, turning onto the avenue. I know about your grandmother, my condolences. Thank you. I'm fine. I'm going into labor any day now. The baby is kicking so much I can't take it anymore. And I can't wait to see him. Adrian smiled and nodded his head, looking at the road. How are you doing? Olivia asked him. Working, the guy replied uncertainly. Did I? I thought you were going to serve. I haven't seen you in a long time. I thought you'd been assigned somewhere. That's what happened. They were going to send him to the Caucasus, Adrian replied. My father got involved. He gave someone some money and put him to work for his old friend's company as head of security.
Do they pay well? Olivia didn't know why she'd asked that question, probably just to keep the conversation going.
I'm fine. I have enough to live on, Adrian replied. Here we are. The car stopped in the driveway. The guy looked at the girl, smiled. Will you invite me for tea? Let's have a little chat. Come on. I don't really have anything for tea, Olivia said. You don't have to. Adrian opened the door, helped Olivia out of the car, and with a click of the remote, locked the car doors. They reached the 4th floor and Olivia pulled her keys out of her purse. How do you get up to the floor with a belly like that? It must be hard, isn't it? Adrian asked. And if you're carrying bags when you come from the store? I don't store much, Olivia said, smiling. Why? I don't need much, and I don't have much money. You can't get by on a scholarship, even if it's an extra one. She opened the door and invited Adrian in. The guy was visiting Olivia for the first time. He noticed that the girl didn't live very well. And where would the wealth come from? At least her grandmother used to get a pension every month, but now it's become difficult. Adrian walked around the apartment. The furniture was old, but well maintained. The wallpaper had not been reglued for a long time, and the television set. Such things were rarely found in the apartments of city dwellers. I'll put the kettle on now, Olivia said. Pouring tea into cups, she asked Adrian. Have you heard anything about Kieran? The boy looked at Olivia carefully. Beautiful, even despite her huge belly, she looked at him, trying to hide her anxiety. She wasn't very good at it. I didn't want to bring it up with you first, but I knew you would. Olivia sat on a stool, stirring her tea slowly with a spoon, her head bowed slightly. Her bangs fell over her eyes, and she fixed them with a light hand. Adrian had a hard time fighting the urge to run his hand through those straw-colored curls. He liked Olivia a lot.
Do you know anything about him? Olivia looked up at the boy.
Not specifically about him, Adrian replied. But they say that the whole company was killed.
Olivia covered her mouth with the palm of her hand to keep from shrieking.
This can't be. I believe in the best, too. After all, Kira and I were friends. I went to the military enlistment office. They said they don't give information to strangers. And there was a woman crying. Her son had been killed on that business trip. They don't disclose information so as not to worry people, Adrian said sadly, but rumors spread faster than television news. Can your father find out anything about Kieran through his own channels? Olivia dared to ask Adrian. She knew that his father was not the last man in town, had extensive, very useful connections.
I'll ask, Olivia. I promise. Adrian finished his tea and got ready to leave. I gotta go. Business. Can I write down your phone number and you can keep mine? In case you need it.
Of course, Olivia said with hope in her voice. Maybe Adrian would know something and call her. They exchanged phone numbers and the guy left. Olivia sat down on the couch, thinking. They were friends, but they were very different.
The next day, Olivia's phone rang. She was about to go to bed, having just gotten out of the shower.
"I'm listening," she replied. "Hi, it's Adrian." She heard the phone ring. Olivia's heart raced, wondering if he'd found out something about Kieran.
"Yes, Adrian, go ahead." "Are you still awake? Can I come in? I'm right here, at your doorstep."
"Sure, come on up," Olivia said, and she hurried to throw on a robe over her nightgown. Adrian walked into the hallway carrying 2 huge bags and pulled them in front of the girl. "Here, the humanitarian aid has reached you." Smiling happily, he said.
The boy took off his shoes and strode into the kitchen. Olivia watched in amazement as he put meat, sausage, cottage cheese, milk, candy, canned goods, several kinds of cheese, juices, tea, coffee. The groceries didn't fit on the table anymore, but he kept putting them out of the bags.
"What is it, Adrian?" the girl asked in surprise. "I told you, humanitarian aid." After finishing the groceries, he sat down on a stool. "I didn't ask. Why?"
"Olivia, I just wanted to help you and make you happy," Adrian said. His words sounded sincere, kind, and the smile stayed on his face. Olivia wanted to scold him at first to make him take it all back, but when she saw how pleased he was to do something for her, she melted. "Well, let me at least give you some tea," she said, turning on the gas stove and filling the kettle with water.
"Can we have coffee?" Adrian asked. "I have to be on duty with my men until morning today. The chief has come up with some kind of reinforcement, so we'll be waiting for the enemies until morning."
"What enemies?" Olivia didn't understand. She was even a little worried. "I'm just kidding," the boy said. "They just asked me to be on duty until morning."
They drank tea and talked, but Olivia waited for Adrian to find out something about Kieran and tell her. Finally, when she couldn't bear it, she asked him directly. The boy grew sad for a moment. He seemed to be struggling to find his words.
"You don't have to wait for Kieran anymore, Olivia," he said finally. "No one has any other information. It's all confirmed."
What was confirmed? Olivia didn't want to believe the worst thing that could happen to her lover. Kieran is gone. In one ravine, our military found more than 20 decapitated bodies, officially recognized as the bodies of dead men from Kieran's company. "I'm sorry."
Olivia covered her face with her hands, crying bitterly. Adrian stood up, walked over to her, and put his arm around her shoulders. Suddenly she cried out, and clutched her stomach. "Oh, Mummy. It hurts," Olivia moaned. Oh, I think I'm in labor." "I'll call an ambulance." Adrian frantically searched for his phone. "No, I'd rather drive myself. It would be quicker that way." He helped the girl get dressed and went down to the car, calming her down, saying some ridiculous words that everything would be fine soon. At the same time cursing at the careless drivers who were obstructing the traffic, Adrian pressed the gas pedal. Soon the car entered the courtyard of the maternity hospital and slowed down at the steps. The boy jumped out, opened the door to help Olivia, and gently led her into the waiting room.
"Anybody there?" he shouted. "There's a girl in labor here." On a sunny April morning, Olivia sat in a hospital bed holding her baby boy. The baby had been born strong and healthy. Black hairs tousled on his head, just like Daddy, Olivia thought as she stroked her son, holding him to her chest. Her heart was full of love for this little man, the most dear to her in the world. The door to the room opened and a nurse came in. She was holding a huge bouquet of roses in a bag. "Provushina, Olivia, there's a message for you," said an old woman. "Look at the flowers they're carrying for moms now, 100 of them in a bouquet. In the past, fathers would come to the window, pick daisies and dandelions from the flower beds, and their grandmothers would rejoice, as if they had brought flowers. They loved them." Nanechka laughed, put the bouquet on the nightstand, and put the bag on her neighbor's nightstand.
"Who's it from?" Olivia asked.
A representative, in a suit, said that the note was in the bouquet. But he went under the windows, it seems, said the nurse.
Olivia put the baby in the cuvette and herself took a small card out of the bouquet of roses. "Congratulations on your son." Look out the window, she read the message, written in beautiful, even handwriting. Adjusting the robe across her chest, Olivia walked over to the windowsill. A smiling Adrian was standing below. When he saw the girl, he waved his arms. The guy shouted something, but Olivia could hardly hear anything. The windows in the ward were closed. Then Adrian ran to the car and opened the trunk. From there, he pulled out a luxurious, very expensive baby stroller, blue in color. But
Olivia watched in amazement as he showed her the different positions: a stroller for stroller sleep, a car cradle, a carrier, and this is how you can carry a baby when they're already sitting up. Suddenly, Adrian slipped his hand into his pocket and showed Olivia his cell phone. He dialed her number, and the room resounded with the sound of an incoming call. "Why did you spend so much money?" Olivia asked with a laugh. "It's a very expensive stroller. I wouldn't spare anything for your baby. He'll ride like a real king."
"Thank you so much," Olivia thanked him. "For what?"
"For everything." Adrian looked at her and was silent. Skinny, pale after childbirth, in her hospital gown, she was so touching, so real, so tender, so desirable. "I'm right here. Call me if you need me," he said calmly, emotionless. And then he was gone. Adrian waved to Olivia, got in his car, and drove out of the hospital yard. The girl looked thoughtfully at the car as it drove away. "I wonder why things didn't work out with Mel. Adrian is so caring and open." She remembered her friend and decided to call her and tell her the news. Anticipating how happy Mel would be to hear that Olivia had given birth, how she would start asking questions, she dialed her friend's number. No one answered for a long time, and then she heard some unintelligible sounds. Olivia thought something was wrong with the connection and decided to call later.
On the day of discharge from the maternity hospital, Olivia and the baby were met by Adrian. Over the next few days, the young mum hadn't been able to reach Mel. At first, she was a little worried about why her friend didn't contact her, but then she decided that Mel had found a boyfriend again and was head over heels in a relationship. So she couldn't be bothered with Olivia. It wasn't just Olivia who was having a party. As soon as they heard the music, women in labour and other wards of the hospital leaned against the windows. In the courtyard of the hospital, the musicians were ready to play a touching song on command. Fountains of balloons and fresh flowers were set up around the hospital.
"What a celebration yours made for your discharge." The midwife shook her head approvingly. "A caring father, there aren't many like him nowadays. Most of them come drunk or, at best, hungover." Olivia didn't bother to reassure the doctor that it wasn't the baby's father. Why would she? It was a complete stranger, and she didn't need to know the details of the patient's personal life. For a moment, she thought about Kieran. Why fate was so cruel and he died without even recognizing that he had a son. It was a pity for Olivia, and that the grandmother wouldn't get to see her great-grandson.
"Look, are all the body parts in place?" jokingly asked the midwife, undressing the boy. "Here are the hands, here are the hands, here are the feet. There are 5 fingers everywhere. Look at him, he is smiling. He understands that he will go home with Mummy and Daddy."
The woman began to dress the newborn, and when she finished tying a beautiful bow on the envelope, she said, "Hold your happiness tight. Grow up healthy and come back for your second."
Olivia thanked the midwife, and they walked out onto the porch of the birthing center together.
At that moment, music came on and a handsome male baritone began to play. The love song moved Olivia so much that she even wept. Adrian walked over and embraced the baby. The staff was in tears at the touching scene, which was watched by the entire maternity ward. When the music finished, dozens of colorful balloons soared into the sky. "What did you name him?" Adrian asked, examining the boy by lifting the edge of the envelope. "Taylor," Olivia answered. "Taylor Swan." Adrian looked at her. At that moment, there was so much happiness and tenderness on Olivia's face that he couldn't resist hugging her. The driver with his camera jumped up in time to take a wonderful picture.
Olivia hadn't been able to reach Mel because she'd been out. She was in the hospital, the same hospital where Olivia had given birth, but one floor up, in the pathology department. "What's going on outside?" she asked her roommate when she heard the music. Mel couldn't get up and walk to the window. She had just been given an IV.
Some of the young mothers are met by a happy and loving daddy, replied a neighbor in the ward, who was sitting on the windowsill and watching what was happening in the yard. What, with an orchestra? Mel wondered.
Hey, musicians, balloons, flowers. A happy woman who has such a husband. He'll probably carry her in his arms and give her child the best, she sighed, stroking her bulging belly.
Where do men like that come from, Mel thought, thinking that Adrian would never do such a thing. All he wanted to do was dive into bed with her, enjoy himself like a young stallion, and not care what happened afterward. Mel didn't dare to tell Adrian that she was pregnant for a long time. She had relationships with different guys, but she always took care that there were no surprises and took birth control pills. But apparently she somehow managed to skip taking the pills, and one day a pregnancy test gave her a positive result. Damn it. She threw the test in the trash can in frustration. We have to solve this problem right away. She dialed the number of her friend who could help and arrange an abortion, but she didn't answer. Mel decided she would call later. Toward evening, Adrian called to say that he would be coming to see her tonight. He entered the hallway at 8 o'clock sharp. Mel's small apartment was instantly fragrant with the scent of expensive, refined perfume.
"Did you miss me, my little hen?" Adrian grabbed the girl by the waist and pulled her tightly against him. "Missed you, of course," she said, smiling. "You don't come so often lately. You've forgotten all about me." "You'll forget you." The boy dragged her to bed, tearing off Mel's silk robe and underwear as he went.
Throwing her on the bed, he unzipped his pants. "Take off your clothes properly," Mel said, panting with excitement and passion, but Adrian was on top of her, growling like a wild animal and roughly overpowering her again and again. When he shuddered and groaned and collapsed, pressing her into the soft, springy mattress, she whispered.
"Why so rude?" A tear rolled down Mel's cheek. She was hurt that Adrian had acted like a street whore, like he'd raped her.
He rolled over onto his back, adjusted his pillow, and said quietly, "I'm sorry, something came up. Give me a cigarette." Mel reached for the pack.
"Are you in trouble?" she asked. The girl had already gotten to know Adrian's character very well. Sometimes he was rude to her, but more often he came to relax in her arms and complain about his unloved job, his failed military career, his overbearing father who decided everything for him.
"No," Adrian replied. "It's fine." "I have something to tell you." Mel decided to tell Adrian that she was pregnant. There was a faint hope in her soul that the guy would want a child and marry her, or at least that they would raise the baby together. She agreed to it even without a wedding, without a stamp in her passport. Adrian took a drag on his cigarette and released a cloud of blue smoke from his mouth.
"I just found out today, ... I'm pregnant." "Well done, you've created a problem for yourself. Now you'll solve it," the guy said indifferently.
"You got me pregnant." Mel rolled over onto her stomach and looked into his eyes.
Adrian was quiet for a moment, finished and put the cigarette out on the ashtray, then stood up and pulled on his pants.
"Mel, I'm not a child and neither are you," he said, and the girl felt the metallic tones in his voice. "You and I both know what we have in common. I never promised you anything, and I certainly never dreamed of having children with you." "Adrian, but it happened. I didn't do it on purpose." She got it. The guy was buttoning his shirt. "And how do you know it's me who got it, and not the other men you've been screwing around with?"
"Adrian, how can you do this?"
"Why? You think it's a secret to me that it's not just me you're spreading your legs in this bed? You're a whore, Mel. You're just a painted, brainless whore. You think anyone would want to have children with you? I can't even imagine you as a mother. What can you give your children?"
"I don't understand why you're doing this to me. I just wanted to tell you the news, because we have to decide what to do together." Mel got up from the bed and put her arm around Adrian's shoulders. "I'm not forcing myself or this baby on you. I'll have an abortion and that's it. Just don't leave me." Adrian pushed her away, pulled several large bills out of his wallet and tossed them on the nightstand.
"There should be enough here," he said, and walked out of the bedroom. A second later, Mel heard the door slam shut in the hallway. What an asshole, she thought, picked up her phone and dialed the number of the grocery delivery phone.
"Hello, I'll have a pizza and a bottle of whiskey. Write down the address."
Adrian brought Olivia and the baby home. A security guard followed them up to the 4th floor of the girl's apartment, carrying heavy bags. Olivia was completely immersed in her thoughts. Even though she was happy, she had a lot of problems to solve: paperwork for her allowance, a call to the pediatric clinic, and a graduation coming up. "Is she asleep?" Adrian asked as Olivia entered the kitchen. He was taking groceries out of the bags and putting them in the refrigerator. "I've got a lot of stuff here, so I figured I'd have enough for a while, and then I'd bring you whatever you want. I also bought some baby stuff. I didn't know what I'd need." Olivia glanced at the bags of diapers, onesies, bottles. "Thank you. You're a big help." "It's because I love you, ... and your baby," Adrian said softly. The girl looked up at him. It seemed to her that Adrian was different now, different from before. Serious or something. "Olivia, trust me, it's going to be hard for you to raise a baby on your own. And I'll do anything for you. I've liked you since the first time I met you at the bus stop when we went on that picnic. But I couldn't tell you then. You realize. Adrian, you're kind, caring, sweet. I don't know what I'd do without you. But you know I don't love you."
"It doesn't matter, as long as I love you. You'll never, ever regret believing me. I'm begging you, let's get married. I'll be a good father to Taylor." His father, as Kieran Olivia looked out the window and watched the children playing in the yard. Taylor would grow up to build sand towers in the sandbox.
It's sad and painful, but Kieran will never see his son. I can keep his memory alive, always telling Taylor what a hero his father is. And maybe you and I can still give Taylor a little brother or sister.
Feeling him come up behind her and touch her shoulder, Olivia turned, looking intently into Adrian's eyes.
"What about Mel?" the girl asked. "What will she say when she finds out?" Mel and I had never had anything serious, just meetings for fun. Neither she nor I ever loved each other. And anyway, Mel wasn't made to be a wife and mother, and you're different. A baby cried from the room. Olivia hurried to the baby, and Adrian sat down at the table and thought. It seemed to him that Olivia was about to agree to his proposal. They got married. They decided not to have a wedding or a big party, which upset Adrian's parents very much, but he was firm in his decision. "We have a young son, no time for weddings," Adrian said as he cut off to his parents. For a year, they'd been adjusting to each other. Adrian went out of his way to do everything for Olivia and Taylor. He bought expensive gifts and jewelry for his wife and toys for Taylor. Olivia saw her husband's efforts and was grateful, but every day she noticed more and more how much Taylor looked like Kieran. He had the same eyes, hair, even a smile. The girl never forgot her lover. Adrian saw it all, felt it all, and hoped that time would heal the wound and cover with the dust of oblivion the memories of his wife about Taylor's father. Olivia was walking with her son in the park one day. Taylor sat in his stroller, gazing around. He had a cookie in his hand. Olivia rolled the stroller down the alley. The girl came to this park often. There was no traffic noise, birds were singing, and she could always talk to other moms, just like her, walking with strollers. Suddenly, a tall, slender girl caught her attention. She staggered down the alley, sometimes falling, struggling to get up and walking again. Olivia quickened her pace a little. "Young lady, are you ill?" she shouted, approaching the stranger. And she collapsed back onto the paving stones, leaned on her arm and tried to get up. "Come on, I'll help you." Olivia held out her hand to the girl, and when she looked up, she recognized the stranger as her old friend. "Mel, what's the matter with you?" Olivia exclaimed in surprise. She helped her friend up, sat her down on a bench, and rolled the stroller with Taylor closer. Her friend was drunk. Her hair was strewn over her shoulders. Her clothes were dirty, and an arrow was crawling down her leg in black capron stockings. Mel recognized Olivia, looking at her with a hazy stare that reeked of alcohol. "You look good." "Thank you, Mel," Olivia said. Why are you here like that? What happened to you? And a lot of things happened to me. Mel burst into a coarse, drunken laughter. And you, and your Kieran, and my Adrian. A lot has happened to all of us. What do you mean? Olivia didn't understand. Mel, are you sick? Do you need help? Help? The girl opened her purse and pulled out a pack of cigarettes. She turned to Olivia and squinted her eyes. You're the one who needs help, living in a fog and not noticing anything around you. What are you talking about? Wake up, Mel, we were friends. And I'm not friends with traitors. You betrayed everyone, me, Kieran. You know how bad I felt when you started living with Adrian. And you know how bad Kieran felt when you wouldn't even let him look at his son. What the hell are you talking about? Olivia didn't understand what her former friend was trying to accuse her of. Do you have any money? Mel asked her suddenly. There's a card, replied Olivia. Let's go. Mel struggled to get up from the bench and walk down the alley. Olivia followed her, rolling the stroller with her son in front of her, not wanting to let her go until she explained everything and told her about herself. They reached the nearest supermarket. Give me the money, Mel said. Olivia handed her a bank card. Her friend entered the store and came out a short time later holding a bottle of alcohol. Soon they were sitting in the kitchen of Mel's apartment. Olivia was amazed at how messy the rooms were. There were things scattered everywhere, bottles, dirty dishes in the sink, and an ashtray full of cigarette butts on the windowsill. Mel took a glass and poured herself from the bottle. I'm not offering you one. I know you won't, she muttered and raised her glass. Cheers. How did you come to this, Mel? Rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled and rolled. And you helped me ruin my life with Adrian. He told me you didn't have anything. Olivia tried to justify herself. Well, of course, there's nothing but 2 kids. What kids? Olivia thought Mel had gotten drunk and was talking nonsense. But her friend got up from her chair and shuffled to her room, her torn tights shuffling across the floor. When she returned, she placed a photograph in front of Olivia. It showed 2 babies. They looked no more than 3 or 4 months old. This is Ciara and Vincent. And their father Adrian, pointing her finger at the picture. Mel said, my children, the twins. Olivia looked at the faces of the babies in surprise. They were lying on the beautiful blanket next to each other, looking exactly alike. You had a baby with Adrian. When? Olivia exclaimed in bewilderment. Only 6 months ago. And that asshole didn't recognize the kids. And I had my parental rights revoked. With his connections, he made a quick deal and put the kids in an orphanage. Everything she'd heard from Mel seemed unbelievably crazy to Olivia. Adrian couldn't do that. Yes, he had connections, he could do a lot of things, but putting his children in an orphanage. And then he wanted to kill me. He got me drunk and tried to strangle me, but Kieran wouldn't let him. He hit him so hard. Mel laughed, her laughter sounding unnatural, theatrical. Kieran, who? What are you talking about? I don't understand anything, Olivia said, and stopped drinking. She took the glass from her friend, catching an angry look. Your Kieran punched him. Adrian was choking me and he punched him in the face. Mel, wake up. Kieran died on a military trip. No, he didn't. And he saw you. Where? I beg you, pull yourself together and tell me everything in detail. It turned out that Kieran was back, and the first thing he did was to stop by his friend's house. As he approached the driveway, he saw Olivia and Adrian come out of the door. The guy had a small child in his arms. They smiled at each other, talked about something, and then got into the car and drove away. A few days later, Kieran decided to find out about Olivia and Adrian from Mel. He went to her house, knocked on the door, but no one opened it. In his heart, the guy banged on the door. It was unlocked. Entering, he heard the sounds of a struggle, ran into the bedroom where Adrian was choking Mel. Kieran punched him and pulled him away from the gasping girl. Ah, he's back. Adrian, recognizing his old friend at once, said, Hero, now you're going to get your rights, but your Olivia is no longer yours. She's my wife and we have a son growing up." Adrian pulled his passport out of his pocket and took out the picture that had been taken when he was discharged from the hospital. Olivia was smiling from the photo, and the boy was holding a newborn baby in his arms. As she listened to her friend's story, Olivia could hardly believe what was happening. It turned out that Kieran was not dead, as Adrian had told her. He was alive and knew nothing about his little son. "Give me a glass," Mel asked quietly, calming down. "I need a drink." Olivia moved the glass, watched silently as her friend poured the liquor into it, and then asked,
"Why didn't you tell me?"
"Don't you understand? I hated you with all my soul. Where's Kieran now?" "He's probably gone. Who knows where he is?" Mel waved her hand uncertainly.
"Why didn't he come to me, but went to Adrian first? He didn't mention it."
"Nope," the girl shook her head, pouring herself another. "I understand him though. He's so handsome, proud, strong, and he'll come to you one-armed." "What do you mean, one-armed?" Olivia didn't understand anything at all. Everything Mel was telling her could have been the plot of a stupid show, like so many shows on TV nowadays. But it couldn't have happened in real life. "And his arm was torn off on a business trip," Mel said, collapsed her head on the table and snored. The girl fell into a dead, drunken sleep. Returning home, Olivia wondered how to go on with her life. On the one hand, she has a strong family, a caring husband, a favorite son. On the other hand, Kieran, as it turned out, is alive, and he thinks that Olivia left him, preferring to live with Adrian. She was hurt that he hadn't made himself known, hadn't come to see her, but had appeared in front of Mel and a former friend. All day, thinking about how to live on, she decided that she would not change anything in her life. But Mila should be helped. 3 years had passed. Olivia and Adrian lived in a spacious apartment and raised Taylor together. The baby was growing up to be a very bright, active boy, constantly demanding attention. Olivia spent the whole day dealing with her son, and in the evening waited for her husband from work. Sometimes, looking out the window as he drove up to the entrance and parked the car in the yard, she thought that more caring than Adrian husband could not find. He spent all his free time with his wife and son, and last year they flew to Italy together. The doctors said it was good for the boy to breathe the healing air. For his 3rd birthday, Adrian gave Taylor a huge battery-powered car. The boy wasn't very good with the car, but he squealed with delight when his dad helped him steer it and race it down the long hallway. The whole family gathered to celebrate Taylor's birthday. Adrian's parents treated Olivia and her son calmly, not complaining, but every chance they got they had the pleasure of reminding her that she was an orphan and a dependent. Olivia didn't like it, and Adrian just waved it off, saying, "Never mind." Her husband's older sister often reproached Olivia for running around with her son like a piece of paper, and Adriana still hadn't given birth. As she set the table for the party, Olivia thought she would have to endure the reproaches, taunts, and sarcastic phrases directed at her again. Lately, she'd noticed more and more that Adrian himself was bringing up topics that insulted and offended his wife. Why he did so, she did not understand. When they were alone, more caring and affectionate Adrian could not imagine anyone. But in the presence of people who were strangers to Olivia, he always found something to pick on. And this time he was out of line. Olivia's taunts amused her in-laws. Everyone at the table seemed to be having fun except her. "Adrian, stop it. I feel bad," Olivia tried to stop her husband. But he went on. Then the girl could not stand it. Trying to appear calm, she smiled and said softly but very clearly, "The other day I went to the orphanage where your children live, honey. I looked at them, brought gifts and toys. You know, they're so cute. Why don't we take them for the weekend? The principal said it's possible." Adrian put his fork on the table silently, then slapped Olivia, grabbed her by the hair, and dragged her out of the room. The family stared at them, uncomprehending. "You've scraped it all together, daughter-in-law, on your own head," said the mother-in-law sneeringly. The guests continued to eat as if nothing had happened, placing appetizers and salads on their plates. "Mom, what kids did Olivia say Olivia was talking about?" Sister Adrian suddenly asked. "Who knows who she is? She's got some nonsense in her head, so she's just saying whatever she wants." Andrea only has Taylor. In the kitchen, Olivia wheezed, trying to free herself from her husband's strong, clinging fingers, which squeezed her neck. Adrian pinned her against the refrigerator and hissed, trying to keep his voice low so the family wouldn't hear. "Who do you think you are? You think you can tell my parents and sister whatever you want? Let go or I'll scream. I know all about you and Mel, about how you put your own children in an orphanage and stripped her of her maternal rights. About how you've been lying to me all these years. Shut up. Have you forgotten the swamp and poverty I pulled you out of? What would you be blaming your bastard for if it wasn't for me? My son is not a degenerate. He has a father and he's alive. That's something to remember. You should be grateful to me for the rest of your life. You've been living like a cheese and butter. Let go or I'll tell your parents." Adrian looked into her eyes with anger. He loosened his grip and finally let go of Olivia. She sat on the stool, rubbing her neck where her husband's fingers had left marks. "How could you? You acted like a monster." "It's none of your business. Mel's a whore. I never loved her. And the fact that I gave birth to her is something you have to prove." Already, Olivia said quietly. "What?" Adrian didn't understand what his wife meant. "It's already been proven. Mel and I ordered a paternity test. Vincent and Ciara are your children. They're your blood twins. What kind of monster are you to throw your own babies out of your life? How could you deprive them of their mother? People like Mel can't be normal mothers. She's a slut and an alcoholic." "What are you talking about? Didn't you do everything you could to make her drink? Didn't you want to kill her? Kieran's a witness. He'll testify that you strangled my friend to get rid of her." "You can't prove anything." Suddenly, Adrian's eyes were aflame. No one would believe a degenerate alcoholic who'd been deprived of her parental rights.
"You're wrong. Mel has been in treatment and hasn't been drinking alcohol for a long time," Olivia said triumphantly. "She and I are almost finished with all the necessary paperwork. Soon she'll have her children back, and she'll be happy. And I'm leaving you right now. I've had enough."
"Stop." Adrian grabbed her hand and gripped the girl's wrist tightly with his fingers. "Do you still want your relatives to know?" Olivia looked boldly into his eyes, determined to tell her parents-in-law what their favorite son was really like. The guy let go of her hand, lowered his head. "Go away and never come into my life again," was all he said. On a May morning, Olivia and Mel were picking up the children from the orphanage. Vincent and Ciara were all dressed up. Mel had bought them nice suits and shoes, and she was getting excited. The day before, she and Olivia had cleaned up the apartment, setting up the nursery in Mel's former bedroom. Now there was a bunk bed, a closet full of children's things, and a large basket of toys. Mila had a very difficult time. When she learned what had happened in her life, Olivia began to visit her friend whenever she could get away from home. When she went for a walk with her son, she bought food to feed Milka, but she kept demanding alcohol. But long conversations, convincing her that only by stopping drinking, she could get her children back, did the trick. Mel agreed to treatment. For 2 months, she was in a private specialized institution, where Olivia paid for her treatment. When Mel was discharged, she didn't look like the cheerful, mischievous, flighty girl her friend had known her to be. Something was broken inside her. She kept thinking about the children, berating herself for the mistake she'd made in her life by letting Adrian send them to an orphanage. Olivia, on the other hand, convinced her every time that everything could still be brought back. She did everything she could to get Mel the twins. And so today they would settle into this room with new baby wallpaper and a big fluffy rug on the floor. Looking around the room, pleased that everything was working out so well, Mel said, "Thank you, Olivia, and I'm sorry if I hurt you in any way." "Don't thank me, we're friends." "It'll be okay." Olivia hugged her friend, who had recently been ready to fall into the abyss, to lose the most important thing in a mother's life, her children. "Mommy, will they let me play with toys?" Olivia asked Taylor. The girls laughed. "Of course they will," they replied almost in unison.
"Well, shall we go?" Mel said. "We have to pick up some more cake and brownies."
Mel was happy that in just a few hours her apartment would be filled with children's laughter and happiness.
Walking home from Mel's, Olivia held Taylor's hand. They walked down the park alley that led to Olivia's house. The girl wondered how life might have turned out if she hadn't met Kieran in that park one day. Yes, she had been through a lot, but looking at the boy walking beside her, holding her hand tightly, Olivia was happy.
"What do you think of Ciara and Vincent?" she asked Taylor. "Good ones. Why were they living in an orphanage? They have a mom, Aunt Mel." "It happens," Kid Olivia answered uncertainly. Taylor was a bright boy and understood a lot of things, but she thought it was hard to explain to a child why children were abandoned by their parents. When he grew up, he'd understand. After Olivia packed her bags and left Adrian on her son's birthday, his relatives repeatedly called her and threatened to take Taylor away. Her husband never dared to admit to his parents that Taylor wasn't his son. Well, then Olivia had to tell them herself. Tired of listening to the threats, she did just that. "Taylor is not Adrian's son or your grandson," she told her mother-in-law. "So leave us alone and don't call again." Adrian's mother yelled something else into the phone, that she would sue, take a DNA test, take the baby away from Olivia, but she just hung up. Olivia wanted nothing more to do with those people. Tomorrow she would take Vanya to Mila's. Her friend promised to stay with him for a couple of hours while Olivia was at the interview. The girl was going to get a job at the gymnasium. If everything went as Olivia planned, Taylor, as a child of an education worker, would be given a place in kindergarten. Life was getting better. As she thought about it, Olivia walked leisurely down the alley, holding her son's hand. Taylor snatched his hand out of hers and ran down the path. "Taylor, where are you going?" Olivia shouted after her. But the boy ran and ran. He saw a beautiful butterfly and rushed after it. Suddenly, the child stumbled and fell with all his might on the paving stone path. Olivia rushed to her son's aid. She saw a strange man come to the child, lift him up and put him on his feet. "Son, you're all right," she ran over to the boy and squatted down to examine the wound on his knee, which was visible through his torn pants. "How could it be? How many times have I told you not to run?" She suddenly realized that a man had helped the boy up and thanked him without even looking in his direction. "Thank you so much for helping my son." "You're welcome, because that's my son too. How you doing, fighter?" Olivia slowly raised her eyes to the stranger who had come to her child's rescue. Her heart was pounding frantically. She stood up, not taking her eyes off his face. Kieran looked at her with the same kind, loving velvet eyes. "Hello, Olivia," he said quietly. "I've been waiting for you here for a long time." Kieran ... Love Olivia couldn't believe her eyes. Taylor's father was standing in front of her, the man she loved most in her life. "I thought I'd never see you again. I thought you'd never come back." "How could I not come back? I promised you, remember? I promised you there, at the campground, surrounded by centuries-old pines, in our cabin, where we loved each other so much." "I remember everything, and I never forgot," Olivia said quietly. "Let's go home." The three of them walked down the park alley toward the exit. Kieran held his son with one hand. But Olivia didn't care that her boy's father had come back crippled. The important thing was that now they would always be together.